Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Marvel. I become Destroyer. Then destroy the Marvel world. It starts. Chapter 81. For other organizations to learn the location of this secret research base, Baron Strack may need to be nervous for a while. However, it is normal that AIM, a scientist organization that originally belonged to Hydra and now Hydra, know each other. They are both supervillains and they have long agreed that they can't sell each other's secrets, so Killian is undoubtedly the most suitable person to appear in this place. Long time no see, Baron Straker. It seems that the last time we met was when I had just become the leader of AIM. Killian greeted each other in a friendly manner. It was not the first time the two met, although the age may be older. Baron Strack responded coldly. Killian, don't say any polite words. You will come to me not to say hello. I heard that you were accused by the Avengers at your experimental base in New York. It's a nest. Are you here to ask us for help? Haha, AIM has been hit hard recently, but so are you. The people who infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. were driven to extinction by the Avengers. I think your side is even more injured. Killian also poked C for tat the sore point of Baron Strack. It is true that both AIM and Hydra at this time are just hard brothers who are forced to get close to desperation by superheroes, and the lives of both sides are quite difficult. It is in this case that Chen Lu will have the opportunity to use Hydra. So do you have any good suggestions? Baron Straker also noticed the disdain of Kirian's tone. There is only one possibility that the other party will have this kind of superiority. He has what can break the current situation. Things in dilemma. Maybe you can also pull the Hydra by the way. Killian smiled confidently, and suddenly the conversation turned around and said, I am indeed here to provide good advice, but before that, can you help me do something first? The conversation here does not need to have. Before Kirian had finished speaking, Baron Straker understood it, and cast a look at the soldiers behind the projection. Hearing only a bang shot, the black market merchant who had worked so hard to deliver something had a blood hole on the head and planted it on the ground. The other soldiers dragged his body and left the reception room one after another, leaving only Baron Strack alone facing the three-dimensional projection of Killian. If your proposal does not satisfy me, you will end up like this corpse. Killian didn't care about Baron Strack's danger, smiled and pointed to the helmet and blood on the table and explained, I know your style, your majesty, let's listen to my bargaining chip first. This blood is the thing. The zombie blood of the zombie incident in the United States is now raging, and this helmet is a helmet that can control zombie operations to a certain extent. You should understand the value of these two things. Hearing the word zombie, Baron Straker's face suddenly changed, and his eyes sharply questioned Killian. The zombie virus was made by your AIM. Is it the variant of the extremis virus you studied? You guys, it's really messy. Now half of the nuclear bombs on the planet are aimed at New York. No wonder the Avengers will trouble you. Since Killian can take out the helmet that controls zombie operations, Baron Strack's first reaction is naturally that the zombie virus was created by Killian for his own benefit. And the power of the zombie virus does not need to be explained. There has never been something that can attract half of the nuclear bombs on the Earth in human history. That was just an accident. Killian just didn't deny the other party's guess, and then continued to throw out new proposals. Our focus is still on the extremis virus, but we also do research on the zombie virus. Some achievements have been made, so we are considering whether to trade these research results. Research results? Are you talking about the method of manipulating zombies? So, you haven't developed a vaccine. Baron Strack keenly perceives the blind spot in Kirian's words. There is no doubt that vaccine is such an important thing. Killian found out that it was impossible not to bring the sample. Killian also admitted frankly, we are not a medical institution, Your Majesty Baron. Someone else will make something like a vaccine. Now, let me just ask you, are you willing to accept this transaction? The zombie virus without a vaccine is undoubtedly a time bomb that can kill itself at any time. In normal times, Baron Strack would not want to take over such a risky research result. But as far as Hydra is currently badly injured, his options are really limited. What do you need? It's just a collaboration, Killian said meaningfully. Watching Kirian shut down the communication with Sokovia, Chen Lu knew that Kirian had successfully hooked the Hydra. Once the zombie virus gets into Hydra's hands, they will naturally open up a broader path for Chen Lu to spread the virus, when it comes to international influence, there is no villain organization in the world that can compare to Hydra. Institutions born from the Nazis since World War II have more outlets. As for the zombie-controlled helmet that they regarded as a treasure, it was just a toy that Chen Li used to amuse the child. If even Tony Stark can't create a black technology that can affect Chen Li's dominance over zombies, let alone the mortal-level scientists of Hydra. Soon, another piece of good news was also delivered. Tony's notification came from the communicator. As expected by Chen Li, Director Nick of S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted to call Chen Li to meet at the Avengers base, the air carrier headquarters. This will be a banquet with no return for the time being. Tony, you stay here, and I will go there alone. Chen Li got into Tony's luxury car and said to Tony, who was planning to get in as usual. Then what excuse should I use to prevaricate the troublesome Mr. Director? I was drunk and couldn't get up last night. No excuses, the captain will help you find a good reason. Before Tony could react, Chen Li had already stepped on the accelerator and walked away. Considering the conversation on the death of Tony's parents on the phone last night, Captain America will definitely discuss the countermeasures with Nick, who is concealing the truth. And Chen Li just needs Tony to develop new weapons for himself day and night. Fortunately, the basement of Tony's house has the function of anti-nuclear bomb. If he stays there, no one is qualified to drive him out. The guests who give charcoal in the snow are of course more valued than the icing on the cake. After the loss of Iron Man, the Avengers will need the newcomer Chen Li to join. After about an hour's drive, Chen Li arrived at the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Sanqui building. On the sea next to this tall and majestic cylindrical building, there was a ship suspended out of thin air, at least 100,000 tons. Level of super-giant sky aircraft carrier. Its existence can always give people a kind of UFO-like fear of aliens coming to invade the Earth, and the tri-curved wing building several hundred meters high looks small like a toy model beside it. No wonder the movie, Captain America 2 Inches said that only 3 such air carriers are enough to rule the world. Air carriers equipped with nuclear weapons are almost invincible. The technological gap between the S.H.I.E.L.D. army and the normal human army is really that of aliens. It makes no difference if people come to invade the Earth. And more importantly, this is where the Avengers was established and is currently the headquarters of the Avengers. The person who was sent to greet Chen Li is the Black Widow of the Avengers. This sinful woman who has had an ambiguous relationship with almost all the Avengers exudes an extremely charming charm in every move. Of course, it is not ruled out. This is an act of deliberately tempting Chen Li, but it is a pity that Chen Li is not interested in this woman who can have no lower limit for the task. Why are you alone, Tony? Seeing Chen Li who came alone, the Black Widow was not surprised from the expression. From this, we can conclude that she is also one of the informants of the truth about Tony's parents' death, just in routine. Ask Chen Li about it. Chen Lubian also pretended to be crazy and replied, he doesn't want to see you for the time being, and I don't know why. I hope he will not go astray. Okay, please come with me. Every word of this woman in the deep city is not like the truth, it is difficult to understand what she is thinking. The Black Widow turned and walked into a small jet levitation fighter, let Chen Li sit in the transport cabin at the back and fly to the sky aircraft carrier. After officially approaching this legendary battleship, you can truly feel its magnificent structure like the wonder of the world. Its main body is similar to that of U.S. aircraft carriers in active service, with tall and tall tower bridges, neatly docked on the double decks of various types of aircraft of various sizes, which can perfectly do the work required by any aircraft carrier in the world. And the most exaggerated place, of course, are the 4 huge turboprops operating loudly beside the main body. It is these 4 gadgets that send this tens of thousands of tons to the sky, and the positive pole rotates and jets downwards. A strong air current like a tornado. Welcome to our sky fortress. This is the first thing Nick said to him after Chen Li got off the plane. It seems that even though he usually has a bitter face, he is very proud of his own sky carrier. This giant aircraft armed to the teeth is indeed enough to be used as a fortress that is difficult to conquer. Of course, the premise is that there are no traitors inside him. In Avengers 1, a brainwashed Eagle Eye and a few special forces can make it almost crash here. This time, it will probably usher in a more serious historical repeat. Chen Li's combat effectiveness is not comparable to that of a few special forces. Let's go in quickly. Chen Lu said this and followed Nick into the bridge. At this time, no one here could have predicted how big a wolf they would lead into the room. The command center of the aircraft carrier in the air is a stepped combat command room. A large number of staff are intensively typing on the keyboard in front of the computer. Judging from their nervous expressions and tone, this operation performed by this aircraft carrier is not an example exercises, but a large-scale military operation with clear swords and guns. The hovering power check is complete and the position is stable. Power increased to 8%, ready to set sail at full speed. It's about to set sail, increase the output to the highest level. Full speed mode, ready. After the surrounding personnel nodded to himself, Nick stood on the main console and reached out to order, execute shield. Emergency agreement no. 193.6 and activate the reflector. Operation code. Decapitate, the battle begins. A blue energy shield gradually covered the entire aircraft carrier. After the blue light enveloped every corner of the air carrier, the giant battleship slowly became transparent, and the grid-shaped steel plates became one by one. Unable to see clearly, the figure of the entire aircraft carrier disappeared completely in the sky in the end, and even the slightest shadow could not be left on the ground. The reflector has been activated and it has entered a completely invisible state. Hill, the deputy director of S.H.I.E.L.D., standing next to Nick, reported to him, and at the same time announced that this huge aerial fortress had entered a state of full preparation. Okay, everyone. Nick turned to Chen Lu and several Avengers members behind him and said, now the decapitation operation is officially started. Before the operation is terminated, I hope you can cooperate well and not proceed with the outside world. Any communication also requires you to stay on this aircraft carrier for a while. In fact, these words are meant for Chen Lu to listen to. After clearing out the Hydra lurking insiders in S.H.I.E.L.D. yesterday, Nick is finally confident that he can use the SHI. The killer was put under house arrest. That's why Chen Lu-kai thought that this summoning was a banquet that had no return for the time being. Nick could not release Chen Lu, a highly suspected figure, from the control of the Avengers until Hydra was dealt with. I am willing to cooperate. All of this is in Chen Lu's calculations. Anyway, I have another body that can continue to do evil. If you want to be under house arrest, you will be under house arrest. It happened to be able to clear up Chen Lu's suspicion and further penetrate the Avengers by the way. For Chen Lu, it was a two-eyed thing. At this time, Chen Lu took a closer look at the Avengers members present, and found that only Captain America, Thor, Bruce Banner, and Black Widow were present at present, including Hawkeye and other ordinary superheroes such as War. None of the machines, the Falcon and others were present. It seems that they were assigned to other tasks. Captain America was the first to come up and greet Chen Lu in a friendly manner. Hello, Chen, I am very happy that you are willing to join us. No matter what you have done before, you are now one of our superheroes. Thank you very much. Help us in the Hydra raid. Chen Lu noticed that Captain America was talking about a member of the superhero and not a member of the Avengers. Based on his personality, he should be someone who does not know how to play this kind of scheming. I am afraid it is Nick, an old fox. What new instructions were given to him? Is it another temptation? Come if you want. With the Winter Soldier in hand, the chess piece lurking in the Hydra, Chen Lu didn't worry that the opponent would ask any questions that could stump him. Sure enough, Nick immediately suggested to Chen Lu with bad intentions, Chen, I also welcome you to join one of the superheroes. Please don't mind, I don't mind your status as a former Hydra killer, it's just you. The killer training you have received may be too vicious and deadly for a superhero. I hope you can retake our shield. Avengers training. Captain America will be your mentor. What do you think? How about it? Obviously this time the test probe was directed at the keyword, Hydra killer, in Chen Lu's lies. It must have been the punch and kick that was spotted by Nick, a super agent with outrageous eyes, during the previous duel with the Winter Soldier. At that time, Chen Lu's movements were not like a trained professional killer. In order not to expose the loopholes in his lack of combat skills, Chen Lu had already completed the duel with the fewest possible moves, but he did not expect to be spotted by Nick. At that time, in order to avoid affecting the subsequent Hydra undercover cleanup operation, Nick did not lie on the spot to break the law of Chen, and now that Chen Lu has run on the thief ship by himself, this doubt Nick cannot be left alone. Presumably, as long as Chen Lu shows the slightest dissatisfaction, it will be regarded as a manifestation of guilty conscience. This is my honor. Apart from that, Chen Lu could not give any other answers. Under the deck of the aircraft carrier in the sky, there is a simulated combat laboratory with a large football field. There is a highly resistant alloy exterior wall, which can produce a variety of non-lethal stereo projections for simulated combat training. Of course, Nick brought Chen Lu. It's not as simple as coming here for training. Captain America stood in front of Chen Lu in a fighting posture, and said to him eagerly, "Chen, if you want to correct your past killer habits, I must first know what fighting skills training you have received. Now we come to fight. Hit it, and I believe the result will be known soon." At the same time, Nick also warned, "Chen, Tony has tested that your physical fitness is about 5 times that of the captain, so please restrain yourself and show your fighting skills as much as possible. Don't fight with your life. This is not a real battle." The two sang one and the other was to verify the identity of Chen Lu's Hydra killer. Like Captain America, an old opponent who fought with Hydra until now, did Chen Lu use Hydras? He is probably more familiar with his moves than the real Hydra members, and his body is much harder to fake than words. This is simply the most brilliant way of temptation. S.H.I.E.L.D. will not find a more reliable method other than Professor X's mind-reading technique. "Come on, Chen, are you ready?" Captain America eagerly waved to Chen Lu. Whether all this is a carefully crafted lie, or a real correction, he must use his own hands to personally find out. "Of course, Captain," Chen Lu smiled. Spiritual possession Winter Soldier. Chen Lu strode forward violently, his metallized left fist smashed out hard, and a heavy blow hit the shield raised by Captain America, and suddenly a bell rang throughout the training room. Before Captain America could react, Chen Lu swiftly pulled away the shield that was in the way with his right hand, and then violently kicked him on his soft abdomen, kicking him into the air, falling to the ground and rolling. It took a few weeks to calm down. This is really Captain America's carelessness. According to what Nick told him before, Chen Lu's actions should be like a rookie who has not received any combat training at all. Unexpectedly, after this battle, the opponent's set of actions is simply fluent, and the fighting skills are completely beyond the own of the World War II veteran. But Chen Lu in the Winter Soldier state is not used to giving the opponent any chance to breathe. Before the captain could stand firm, he rushed up and jumped one person high, and the silver steel left fist once again blasted down with a thunderous force. Hearing only the loud noise of pong, the alloy floor of the training room was hit by this punch and plunged into a big pit. If Captain America failed to roll and escape in time, the bones in his body would have lost half of it. And Captain America is not a vegetarian. How can he lose face in front of a newcomer, who is proficient in hundreds of fighting skills, and after successfully dodging, he immediately adjusted his posture and counterattacked against Chen Lu. The sharp star-striped shield slammed towards Chen Lu like a meteor. Even though Chen Lu bowed his head in time to dodge, he still had a few hairs cut off. But it seemed that it was just a feint by the captain. The moment Chen Lu lowered his head, he saw a knee expand rapidly in front of him, and slammed into his nose. Chen Lu stretched out his palm to parry the knee collision, but he was forced to step back a few steps. Captain America took advantage of the victory and pursued a gorgeous turn and then tried to throw the shield like a discus. The U.S. team's shield, which can rebound almost infinitely indoors, is undoubtedly an extremely difficult move. Perceiving this, Chen Lu does not retreat but advances, and dashes forward and stretches out his metallized left hand to try to stop in advance. This blow. When the loud metal collision sounded again, Chen Lu and the captain stood facing each other with one end of the shield, and the strong force kept colliding on the shield, causing the star-striped shield to tremble between the two. Okay, enough. Seeing that his goal had been achieved, Nick hurriedly stopped the two in the fight. Chen Lu immediately reacted and released the shield, but Captain America was still confused for a second before regaining his clarity. "Your moves." Captain America looked at Chen Lu's metallized left arm in confusion. "It looks like a person." Chen Lu smiled and explained, "The Winter Soldier used to be my martial arts instructor. I would always imitate his movements unconsciously. To be honest, seeing him come in front of me that day made me nervous for a while." Quote, "It turns out that this kid deliberately pretended not to receive any combat training because he was afraid of being seen through by the former instructor. Under the hint of Chen Lu's language, Nick has found a reasonable explanation for Chen Lu's flaws. Now, the evidence that Chen Lu is telling the truth is countless, and the doubts about telling lies have been completely eliminated. Even if Nick is suspicious, he has to admit that all the information disclosed by Chen Lu is true. This Hydra traitor is worthy of his trust. After a long period of doubt, Nick can only come to this conclusion. Even if there are other doubts, there is currently no way to verify it. Professor X refused to pry into the hearts of others a long time ago, and it is impossible for him to relapse because of such trivial matters. Welcome to the Avengers. Before Nick could speak, Captain America happily announced to Chen Lu. Congratulations. After announcing that Chen Lu is a new Avengers member, Nick had no choice but to shake hands with him politely. Now I can explain to you the plan for the next beheading. The action is for this time. The goal is the secret research base in Sokovia that you disclosed to us before. According to what you said, it should be the place where the zombie virus is studied. In order to obtain all the information about the virus, we must take this place. Even if Nick did not explain, Chen Lu guessed that this operation was aimed at the Sokovia base. After all, he deliberately described this as a research base for zombie viruses in order to cause an all-out war between S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra. Judging from the severity of the current zombie virus, it is needless to say that it is vital for the United States to get first-hand information from its developers, and the fall has the Winter Soldier, Crossbones, Fast Silver, the best candidate for the Sokovia base guarded by the 4 super-villains of the Scarlet Witch is of course the Avengers. And the Avengers focus their eyes on Sokovia, which happened to give Chen Lu's prison robbery team in New York an opportunity. Now S.H.I.E.L.D. is determined to take out Sokovia to learn about the secrets of the zombie virus. As a result, the isolated island prison in New York cannot be withdrawn for rescue no matter what happens. Adjust the tiger away from the mountain and then drive the tiger to devour the wolf. All the actions taken by S.H.I.E.L.D. are currently in Chen Lu's calculations. I will join this operation. I believe you will get the research results of Hydra on zombie viruses. Chen Lu once again emphasized the relationship between zombie viruses and Hydra. He was confident that S.H.I.E.L.D. had something to gain from this operation, but this gain was something Chen Lu had prepared in advance. The toy that the zombie controls, the helmet, is not made for Hydra to play alone. Human beings fight for what they can't actually control and eventually go straight to death. This kind of plot has been staged countless times in science fiction movies, and this time Chen Lu wants to make it perform perfectly again in the Marvel world. The Sky Carrier is approaching the sky above Sokovia step by step. After arriving, it is estimated that it will use its stealth ability to conduct a comprehensive scan and analysis of the Hydra stronghold in Sokovia, formulate a detailed on-site combat plan before launching a formal attack. All this still needs to spend a lot of time, so Chen Lu first returned to the room that S.H.I.E.L.D. had arranged for him to rest. Of course, what Chen Lu does is more than just rest. There is still some time before the robbery action. Chen Lu turned on the computer placed in this room by S.H.I.E.L.D. to check if there was any information worthy of his attention. The result is not surprising. Chen Lu has the authority to view some irrelevant current affairs reports and S.H.I.E.L.D. Code of conduct, and all those confidential information are locked by strict security agreements. This is a matter of course. Even if Nick recognizes Chen Lu as a member of the Avengers, it is impossible to put his heart in him immediately. We must know that Captain America is also kept in the dark by this old fox in most of the actions. After all, Nick is not a person who wants to believe in a superhero. For this perfect patriot, all forces that are not completely controlled by the US government are as a threat. But even so, Chen Lu still found a relatively interesting file about the things that S.H.I.E.L.D. should pay attention to when dealing with various supervillains. Chen Lu read it a bit, and one of the more interesting items is the threat level of the characters. The threat level of a character is an important indicator that S.H.I.E.L.D. Bureau obtains based on the character's current strength and uses it to designate capture countermeasures and the level and number of agents sent. There are a total of 7 levels: weak, common, strong, fierce, mad, God, and nonsense. The following is the general content of the grading system. In parentheses are representatives who Chen Lu thinks are more appropriate. Weak. Existences that are weaker than normal humans, such as the elderly and children. Generally not treated as a threat. Fan. Normally, the level of combat effectiveness of an adult man who has not undergone special physical training. It can be easily subdued by a single agent with bare hands and is less threatening. Strong. A well-trained soldier or a fighter who is good at actual combat. Generally, it is necessary to use light firepower to complete the capture, which is generally threatening. Fierce. Physical fitness close to the limit of human beings, with excellent fighting skills. It is not recommended for a single agent to fight against it. It usually requires heavy firepower to suppress it, which is highly threatening. Representatives. Hawkeye, Daredevil. The above 4 levels are collectively referred to as the human level threat level. Those above the mad level are considered as superhuman level threats. At present, this information only gives the description of the mad level, and the information of the gods and the out-of-wheel levels belong to the authority. Insufficient confidential information. Crazy. The level of threat that exceeds the limits of human beings and cannot be solved solely by manpower is divided into 4 classes: crazy, and quasi-god. Crazy lower position. It has a defensive ability that is hard to solve with heavy firepower and the destructive power that can easily destroy a heavy tank, which is highly threatening. Representatives. Thor, Loki. Mad center. A powerful existence that cannot be explained by human theories. The laws of physics are basically completely ineffective to it, which is an incalculable threat. Representatives. Vision, Scarlet Witch. Crazed upper rank. With the destructive power of easily destroying a city, it is difficult for the human army to cause effective damage to it. It can only rely on a plurality of mad figures or the use of nuclear bombs to solve the terrorist threat. Representatives. Magneto Wong, Professor X. Quasi-god position. A threat that cannot be resolved even with the use of nuclear bombs, and its strength has exceeded the limit that humans can cope with. Once the threat occurs, the situation is basically irreversible. Representative. Black Phoenix, the Hulk with unlimited power enhancement. According to the description of this information, the mad superior character is the biggest threat that humans can deal with at present. Existences above the quasi-god and quasi-god do not need to appear at all, and the only existence that can be called the god level in the Marvel movie world, there is only the planet Devourer in the movie Fantastic Four 2. Can this be considered good news? According to the description of this data, Chen-Lu's current strength is only a relatively upstream level among the mad subordinates, and there is still a long distance from the description of the mad mid-position, let alone playing madly superior and above this. At the quasi-god level, both of these 2 levels of characters can easily obliterate the existence of Chen-Lu, and even if they bring the entire zombie army, they are definitely not their opponents. The road to destruction of the Marvel world is still a long way to go. The isolated island prison is a prison specially set up by S.H.I.E.L.D. for various high-endangered criminals, located next to the island of Riker, New York. It is a highly fortified super prison with high-tech cells of different levels. The entire prison is the crystallization of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s black technology. A half-mile radius outside the Gudao prison is full of jellyfish that can release a deadly neurotoxin. There is a force field in the prison courtyard and is protected by 30 laser guns controlled by a computer. All the jailers wear light armor, their facial features are designed to be indistinguishable by Mach V, and they hold electric shock weapons that can only be set by a specific person to work. The American Thunder Plan also applies here, which allows prisoners to join a state-sponsored anti-evil team to reduce their sentence. This means that for Chen-Lu's prison robbery plan, his opponents are likely to include the supervillains who are threatened by the Thunder Plan. But the first question now is how to get this prison that usually lurks on the bottom of the sea to the sea level, so that the transport ship that Chen-Lu borrowed from Hydra can come in handy. 9:43 a.m. New York time on the island of Riker. Switching back to the dark side body, Chen-Lu, Lei Ting, and Killian greeted the 2 black military medium-sized transport ships in front of them, and came down from above a group of special soldiers wearing the Hydra badge. The 2 leading the team were Crossbones and Winter Soldier. They are the help for this prison robbery planned by Chen-Lu, and they are also scapegoats. Kirian, as the initiator of the cooperative operation, greeted him and shook hands with the Crossbones. "Hello, friends from Hydra, I hope we can cooperate happily this time." "It should be like this, Killian. The split between AIM and Hydra has been long enough. But, you only have 3 people here. And that man, have I met somewhere?" Crossbones stared. Chen-Lu said that Chen-Lu was indeed present in the Hydra raid last time, but at that time Chen Lu had covered his head tightly with a hood and a face mask, and the crossbones just felt a little familiar in body shape. Kilian brought the crossbones back to him, and said to him, "The people I brought will naturally not be ordinary people. The focus of this operation is not on the number of people. We always need something special. People with special skills." In fact, for the crossbones, Kilian's personal appearance is enough to show Aim's sincerity and cooperation. The two people who can stay with the leader of the organization will probably not be incompetent chores, so they did not continue to intervene. Then next, it's time to talk about our plan of action. In the first stage of the operation, infiltrated the isolated island prison to black out the control center and let this mysterious building surface. The hacker program that can break the control system of the isolated island prison has been input into the bionic electronic arm of the Winter Soldier, so he is the main character in the first phase of the operation, and the assistant sent by AIM is Chen Lu, who is the actual behind-the-scenes man. The two will take the lead in sneaking into the isolated island prison under the sea and quietly seizing the control center of this super prison. Today's sea is a stormy weather. The gray sky shows no sunlight. The waves continue to roar and beat the hull. The heavy rain makes the view of the sea even more blurred. 2 kilometers away from the isolated island prison, 2 military transport ships disguised as fishing boats carrying the coalition forces of AIM and Hydra dropped their anchors and floated in the waves. A lifeboat was thrown off the boat and drifted lonely in the direction of the isolated island prison. The narrow lifeboat carried only 2 people, Chen Lu and Winter Soldier, both of whom were wearing heavy mechanical diving suits, ready to dive into this dark sea in the dim light. "Have you considered their failure?" Crossbones asked while looking at the lifeboat gradually moving away from him. This action plan was nominally negotiated and agreed between the two parties, but basically all of the arrangements were unilaterally proposed by Kilian. Due to the tight schedule and seemingly no problem, Hydra had no choice but to agree readily. Therefore, even the Crossbones responsible for leading the team do not know much about the details of this operation. Kilian did not answer directly, but smiled confidently and said, "The so-called consideration is to be reserved for meaningful things." He only heard a plop from a distance, and crossed his head to see that there was no one on the lifeboat. As soon as Chen Lu dived into the water and turned on the powerful searchlight, he found a thick transparent jellyfish group about a few hundred meters ahead, circling and dancing under the seabed, as if it was rotating around something. There is no doubt that this is the outermost line of defense set up by Gudao Prison, a group of artificially bred jellyfish with lethal neurotoxins. These beautiful and dangerous creatures have enclosed a large area of sea, where basically no other marine creatures can survive, let alone living human beings. But their appearance also means one thing. Chen Lu has come to the right place. The heavy mechanical diving suit brought Chen Lu and the Winter Soldier to the bottom of the sea, and even his feet could touch the soil. Able to walk on the sea bottom. Using the uneven rocks nearby as a cover, the two approached step by step in the direction of the jellyfish group. At this depth, the light on the sea surface can no longer shine through, making people feel like they have entered endless darkness. Only the white light of a searchlight in front illuminates the road ahead, but it is only a very narrow view area. If there were no groups of jellyfish, it would be difficult to find the way forward. After a while, Chen Lu and Winter Soldier plunged into the group of jellyfish. From this moment on, the two were greeted by jellyfish. Numerous jellyfish entangled in their diving suits, biting them vigorously, and releasing too much neurotoxin in their bodies. Such a strong offensiveness should have been obtained through some kind of manual training. It is a pity that the mechanical diving suits worn by Chen Lu and the Winter Soldier are not common civilian diving suits, but special military equipment with extremely high protective performance and anti-detection capabilities. This attack is completely useless, and they soon set aside. After these annoying little fairies, they came to a huge building that was as dark as a rock under the sea. This is the legendary underwater prison, the isolated island prison that holds a large number of villains in the Marvel world. Gudao Prison is a huge flat cylindrical building that exudes sci-fi metallic luster from the inside to the outside. It can hide the building in this deep sea, and its outer wall naturally cannot be ordinary reinforced concrete. Chen Lu and Winter Soldier carefully avoided the sight of all the windows above, and silently came to the bottom of the building, preparing to break through the metal outer wall. First, the Winter Soldier took out the bionic electronic arm from the diving suit, and lightly pressed it on the wall, and a slight blue light appeared like a ripple to cover a small area where the electronic alarm system was temporarily invalidated. Then, changing the law of the old, used the metallization ability to create a hemispherical metal film in the water, squeeze the nearby seawater, and then use the blood inflammation ability to cut the outer wall. The blood-red flame glowed with an incredible high temperature, melting the thick metal wall like a piece of paper into a large, passable hole. Even the hot red molten iron did not appear but was directly sublimated into gas. After the two entered the building, the hemispherical metal membrane quickly deformed to fill the hole, preventing the intrusion of seawater outside. But this is only temporary. 1 hour after leaving the body, the biometal produced by Chen-Lu will decompose and disappear on its own. At that time, a large amount of seawater will flow into the isolated island prison, turning it into a real ocean. It does not take such a long time if there is no accident, but the most indispensable thing in the Marvel world is the superhero who intends to do justice. Sneaking in from the outer wall quietly, avoiding the guards along the way to move the position of the atrium, can be regarded as a clear view of the layout of this isolated island prison. Every prisoner here is locked in a metallized single-person prison with a transparent bulletproof glass on one side and steel railings. They are all single rooms, light containers stacked together. Every single prison has only one bed, one chair, and one toilet, all made of plastic, and the prisoners inside cannot commit suicide even if they want to commit suicide. There are many well-known prisoners held here. Chen-Lu can recognize the Green Devil, Red Tank, Dr. Lizard, Abomination, and Hydra's target character, this time former S.H.I.E.L.D. Director and Hydra undercover Alexander Pierce. These supervillains, who are more dangerous than ordinary prisoners, have received some special treatment. For example, the Red Tank, which is unstoppable once running, has both legs folded in half to death. The Hulk can start fighting on the ground with huge creatures. Abomination is that the limbs are completely unable to move because of the exaggerated giant chains. The body should have been injected with superpower inhibitors, and can only use its superpowers when allowed. The highest head of this isolated island prison, General Ross, was standing on the square in the atrium at this time, and under the guard of a large group of jailers, he met the prisoners in this prison one by one. The villain standing in front of him is Spider-Man's mortal enemy, Dr. Octopus. Several jailers are neatly putting a high-tech collar on his neck. The red warning light flashing on the collar is not a safe thing at first sight. And just a few seconds after the collar was put on, it suddenly tightened crazily into the flesh, and it miraculously sank into the skin into the neck, and completely lost its trace from the outside. It's just that, judging from Dr. Octopus's painful expression, this would not be a comfortable experience. This is the Thunder Plan. While passing over the heads of these jailers lurking, the Winter Soldier explained the situation to Chen-Lu in the Zombie Spirit link. The ostensible explanation is that prisoners are allowed to join the state-sponsored anti-evil team thinking that they have reduced their sentences, but in fact it is the chess pieces used by General Ross as cannon fodder. Most of the execution is inconvenient for the military to complete directly, and it is usually shameful. Confidential mission. The collar that fits into your neck is a nanobomb secretly developed by the military. Once you disobey the order, it will suddenly disappear from all parts of your neck. General Ross was originally the main villain in the movie, Invincible Hulk, who was dedicated to the execution of the high-level military officers who arrested superpowers for the government. This guy is a typical chauvinist. He can do all the dirty work for the American government. He doesn't usually do good things, but he can continue to stay on the heads of superheroes and do the majestic blessings. The current Marvel Cinematic Universe lives the happiest villain as this guy. If the Avengers were not established, it is estimated that he would continue to hunt down the Hulk all his life. Now that S.H.I.E.L.D. has announced that the Avengers are under its own control, the general who can't get back to work ran away from the isolated island prison, scoring these powerless supervillains. Falling into this high-level military who is so unscrupulous that he can create another monster Abomination in order to defeat the Hulk, I want to know how dirty the Thunder Project will become. Once the nano-bomb collar sinks into the skin, it is estimated that only death can take it out again. He will be an excellent chess piece. Chen-Lu looked at General Ross, who looked at the prisoners in pain with cold eyes at his feet, and exclaimed, "This cruel guy who has done all the bad things will be a good fuse to trigger the break between the government and the superhero. His identity, status, and experience are all great. There are articles to do." This operation has another important goal. It's just a matter of urgency to enter the control room of the isolated island prison to lift this enclosed gadget from the sea. Since General Ross and his men are focusing on the construction of the supervillains, cannon fodder team, the defense of the isolated island prison control center must be at work. Quite empty state. Along the way, Chen Lu and Winter Soldier not only had to avoid the gaze of the jailer and the surveillance camera, but also prevent any prisoners from seeing through the cell glass. Those poor criminals who were wearing a nanobomb collar by General Ross must be very happy to take Chen. The whereabouts of Lee and the Winter Soldier came to ask for credit to General Ross, which caused the difficulty of the two's secret actions to be greatly increased, and the progress was quite slow for a time. I think we have to change the way. Chen Lu avoided all kinds of sights, hiding in a dim corner and looking around. For example, these jailers, they are seeking their own death. All the jailers in the island prison are wearing lightweight armor, and their facial features are designed to be indistinguishable by Mach V. The so-called Mach V is wearing a special transparent mask on their face. Outsiders can only see the face processed by the optical device, which is as fuzzy as the thick code in the movie, and the sound has also undergone special audio processing makes it impossible to identify clearly. The original intention of this design is to prevent the jailers working here from being retaliated by the villains, but according to the current situation, it just adds another reason for death to this group of unlucky ones. Can't those whore-bred guys have peace of mind? The loud noises keep my ears quiet all day. You have to talk to General Rose. The process of implanting that collar is not as simple as pain. Just a pinch of the thing, even the dumb can give you the pain. The two jailers passed through a blind spot of a monitor while chatting, and suddenly two palms stretched out from the side and dragged them in. Unable to hold his mouth and nose under the cover of the Mach V mask, Chen Lu could only change his fingers into daggers to pierce the opponent's foramen magnum on the back of the opponent's head at the moment of pulling, and accurately cut off the nerves connecting the brain and the spinal cord. The jailer died immediately without the slightest struggle. The Winter Soldier beside him broke the neck of another jailer in one breath, and turned the position of the opponent's forehead and chin. The two corpses were burned to ashes by the blood-red flames. Chen Lu and Winter Soldier each wore a complete set of jailer equipment with hacked identity authentication procedures, and walked out of the corner casually, pretending to be in their mouths. Continue the conversation just now. You seem to enjoy this scream. They deserve it. General Ross on the atrium square is still enjoying the pleasure of controlling his life and killing power. He didn't notice that death was coming quietly just above his head, not far away. Chen Lu and Winter Soldier, disguised as jailers, kept a gentle pace and walked straight towards the control center. At this time, the prisoners who accompanied them were cursed by the prisoners. Judging from the excitement of these guys and the expressions of disgust, the poor treatment of this isolated island prison is a kind of appreciation. Stop. Go back to your post, right now. Just when Chen Lu and Dongbing arrived only one corridor away from the Gudao prison control center, a jailer on guard stopped them on their way and righteously asked them to retreat. Chen Lu had to shrug his shoulders and said to the dedicated sentry, "Hey, friends, don't be nervous, we are not." Before the word, intentionally, was spoken, the Winter Soldier on the side had already hacked the nearby surveillance camera, and as soon as he flashed behind the jailer, he quickly drew his knife and wiped his throat and dragged it into the corridor. The series of movements were so smooth that even the prisoners on the side could not see what was going on. The three jailers they thought disappeared from sight. The dripping blood was evaporated by Chen Lu with blood inflammation in the air, and the prisoners who witnessed thought it was just a warning light. This kind of ambiguous situation is not suitable for people with the status of prisoners shouting and reporting. Once it is found to be false news, don't ask for credit. Instead, you will be locked in a confinement room to enjoy the unique torture created by General Ross. Nothing happened as if nothing happened. The staff in the control center immediately discovered the monitoring screen with the blocked signal. When the technicians carefully observed that it was not a device problem but an external hacker intrusion, an officer immediately planned to notify Ross downstairs. "General, it's a pity that the sudden change happened in vain the moment his finger pressed the call button." After a blue light representing the EMP shock wave flashed, the power of all equipment in the control center was forcibly turned off at the same time, and the lamps, display screens, and monitors lost their original brightness one by one, making this originally sealed room suddenly trapped in a darkness where you can't see your fingers, the people inside can't figure out the situation outside, and the people outside can't detect what's going on inside. Keep calm. Non-combatants get down. Fortunately, in addition to the panicked civilians, the people here thought that there were also a few well-trained special soldiers. This group of soldiers immediately shouted to maintain order, raised their assault rifles and formed a group of guards around them, several guns. The searchlights hung under the tube hit every corner of the control center to try to find the culprit, but no matter how you took it, you could only see civilians lying on the ground obediently. Suddenly a civilian with a pale face looked at the soldiers gathered together, trembling and reaching out his fingers as if pointing at something unbelievable. His mouth seemed to be dumb with a moan of unknown meaning. Ah, 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 ah. What are you looking at? A faint light of fire ignited among the group of soldiers, and it seemed that the flame was beating on someone's fingertips. What is extremely strange is that this is a blood-like bright red fire, a spiritual color that shouldn't exist in this world. Moreover, it was obvious that this was just a flame the size of a lighter, but the heat from above was as intense as if it were close to molten slurry. Chen Lu gently flicked his finger, and the blood-red little flame suddenly turned into a vortex-like huge terrifying flame after crossing a straight line. Behind, this group of soldiers hurriedly turned their heads, but at the moment they were greeted by a large flame that swallowed all of them in one breath, and the blood-red light illuminated the entire control center. In this thick blood explosion, the soldiers were burned into coke by the high temperature without even having the opportunity to pull the trigger, and then turned into ashes and scattered, and finally even the white ashes became invisible dust and dissipated. Exhausted, as if they never existed in this world. It is indeed the correct mode of action to gather all the remaining combat power after falling into the darkness to avoid being destroyed one by one. It is a pity that the so-called infiltration for Chen Lu is to kill all those who see him. This collective action is really them. Seek a dead end. While Chen Lu burned out the group of special soldiers, the Winter Soldier was not idle either. He jumped out of his original hiding place, holding two guns with mufflers at the civilian staff who were obediently holding their heads on the ground and shot them in line one by one. The pistol fired alternately without a single shot missed, and each bullet could accurately take away an enemy. However, within a few seconds, there was no more living person on the ground, and the stunned civilians did not even find that their companions were being shot, and died silently in consternation. After Chen Lu and Winter Soldier were left in the entire control center who could still breathe, the Winter Soldier patted on the table, and another blue electric light appeared, and all the instruments here gradually returned to normal. The surveillance pictures lit up one after another, and the computer controlling 30 automatic defense laser guns also redisplayed the status of each laser gun, most of which were aimed at the atrium square where General Ross was training the prisoners. Alright, let's lift this thing up, and send the group of people below a romantic laser rain by the way. The 5 supervillains, the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Dr. Lizard, Red Tank, and Sandman stood in front of General Ross. Everyone was rearmed, but the nanobomb collar inside their neck could take their lives at any time. This is the cannon fodder team formed under the Thunder Project, a special team composed of lunatics, Frankensteins, and mutants that can only act on the dark side. General Rose stood up and glanced at each of them indifferently and said, "Congratulations, cannon fodder. Starting today, you will act on behalf of the interests of the United States on a global scale. You are not good people, so I will just arrange for you to do good deeds. There are countless superheroes in the world who are doing justice, but there are always some things that the dazzling group of guys can't solve or are unwilling to solve, and that's when you are on the stage. You don't enjoy any civil rights, and there are not many in the world. I personally know your existence and will always be responsible to me alone. When I die, all of you will be finished immediately. You let us bet on our lives, most of the time you just send us to die." The Green Devil touched his neck, his nails could feel the hard touch of the bomb collar, just to reduce our sentence. "Yes, but not," General Ross said meaningfully. He snapped his fingers and several jailers walked out behind them with several suitcases. "Open the box, inside is a pile of high-tech instruments. The purpose of these things is still unknown, but the 5 people in the cannon fodder team are all in front of them, because there are things that each of them desires. You can continue your scientific research in the prison. Even if you want to find a way to escape from here, it doesn't matter. Just do it. Sandman, if you want to restore your flesh and blood, my scientist can help. Red Tank, I allow you to pray to the evil you believe in. This is the ritual props you want. The Green Devil and the Big Lizard are the second personality that troubles you so much. Maybe I can get rid of him. Now you can choose by yourself. Yes, if you want to go back to the boring cell, you should listen to my orders and go out to catch your breath. The road is under your feet. The jailers who surrounded the 5 supervillains quickly gave up 2 paths. One was the corridor to return to the cell, and the other was the stairs leading to them. Almost without hesitation, these 5 people stepped onto the mysterious staircase and, voluntarily, became a member of the cannon fodder team under General Rose. The warden of the isolated island prison stood tightly to the side, looking at the backs of these monsters uncomfortably, and finally couldn't help but said to General Ross, "General, I really don't think this is a good idea. These guys are lunatics. Monsters. They will destroy everything they see. It is no different from reaching into a fire pit." General Ross shook his head, lit a cigarette and spit out a smoke ring. During World War II, the U.S. Navy asked the Mafia godfather in prison to lead the gang members to protect the ships on the New York beach. Madmen and monsters are also humans. Used by others. Fighting with those superpowers for so long made me understand one thing: only monsters can defeat monsters. The Avengers cannot solve all threats, we need a secret force, and this is them. Then General Ross pinched out the cigarette with his fingers, and added, "As for reaching into the fire pit, if the United States needs it, let it happen." Squeak. Karma. The sound of sudden mechanical activation came from all directions at the same time. Everyone present had heard this familiar sound countless times. It was the metal rubbing sound of the giant bracket when the island prison rose above sea level. But the problem is that no one gave the order to raise the island prison. Ross called the control center. "What are UTM doing?" General Ross's angry shout came from the microphone in the control center, but Chen Lu was smashed by the microphone with a wave of his hand. The Winter Soldier next to him was quickly pressing the keyboard with his fingers in front of the computer controlling the laser gun. In the monitoring screen, all the people who were able to move freely except General Ross thought were marked as intruders. In the end, the Winter Soldier's fingertips stopped on the enter key, and with a light press, a voice prompt spread from the broadcast to every corner of the island prison. "The order is confirmed, and all surrounding intruders will be wiped out immediately." The jailers who heard this broadcast were still confused. Intruder? Where's the intruder? As they looked around in a panic, the 30 laser guns above their heads were adjusted and aimed at the top of their heads. Seeing that the gathering light on their heads was a bit strange, the jailers looked up. "Bew, bew, 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 bew." Quote, "The laser pours down at them like a rainstorm. The blue light spot bursts apart as soon as it hits the human body, leaving only a red melting bowl with a big blood hole." When the first wave of bullets hit, 20 or 30 jailers were unfortunately hit and immediately fell to the ground. The remaining jailers could only escape into the bunker in embarrassment, occasionally poking their heads up from the corner. Fang's automatic defense laser gun launched a weak counterattack. The deadly laser beam completely suppressed the firepower of this group of soldiers, forcing them to be helpless, and even many people still don't know why they were targeted by the island prison's automatic defense system. Their live ammunition weapon hitting an automatic laser gun is basically the same as scratching it, leaving only a useless white mark, while the laser gun's aiming is terrible, and the probe can basically declare death if it takes more than 3 seconds. Of course, General Ross knew what went wrong, and shouted to his men, "Send someone up to the control center to see, our defense system has been hacked." But he can only be anxious. To blame, the defense system of this isolated island prison is so good. It is impossible to do so without transporting a tank with ordinary manpower. The laser rain locked all the soldiers of General Ross behind the bunker, and none of them could respond to his orders. "Trash, it's all trash," General Ross yelled angrily, but the group of jailers seemed to be over. He took out a nanobomb collar controller that looked like a smartphone from his uniform coat. After swiping his fingers, a dialog box popped up in the center of the screen, which read, "The activation will detonate immediately after leaving the island prison area. Yes, no." Yes. General Rose pressed his finger heavily on this button. On the rough sea, the light of a few searchlights suddenly shot out from the dark deep sea. Then a black cylindrical building like a giant pudding rose slowly from the bottom of the sea, like an isolated island suddenly emerging from the endless expanse of the ocean. The heavy rain poured down and the waves stirred up more than 10 meters, making the building beat like a dream, making people wonder if they were hallucinating. But the Hydra soldiers on the 2 military transport ships all know that all this is true. This man-made island rising from the bottom of the sea is the legendary place where the world's most murderous prisoners are held, the isolated island prison. Crossbones were overjoyed when he saw the rising prison, and quickly ordered the soldiers under his opponent, raise the anchor. Go to the isolated island prison at full speed. The 2 warships quickly removed the previous fishing boat's camouflage, revealing their original ferocious fangs, and with the roar of the violent motor, they headed for the island prison in the wind and rain. The fierce storm slowed their speed slightly, but the soldiers' murderous aura went straight into the sky. In fact, the Hydra had planned on the isolated island prison for a long time. At this moment, when a full-scale war was about to begin, their fighting spirit was also raised to the limit. Hail Hydra! Compared with the high morale of the Hydra commando outside, the jailers in the isolated island prison were suppressed by their own self-defense laser guns. The cannon fodder squad, who had just stepped on the stairs, also rushed back, showing a scornful smile at the group of jailers who were in the midst of a hard fight, and at the same time disdainful of the laser that was fired at them. This is your first mission. General Ross shouted to the 5 members of the cannon fodder team holding the controller, kill me these laser guns. Dr. Octopus, who was just abused by General Ross, asked with a smile, someone wants to get me out of here, do you expect us to be on your side? General Ross snorted and raised the nanobomb collar controller higher. If you want to disobey the order, I can kill you now. If I have a 3 long and 2 short bomb, it will be activated. More importantly, once you leave, the scope bomb of this prison will also detonate. No matter who comes, you can only rescue your corpse. Whoever wants to try it, just go. These functions are very easy to implement, so there is no need to suspect that General Ross is telling lies. The 5 threatened supervillains know that there is only one way to get rid of this predicament to the collar controller from Ross's hands, and it is not so difficult for the 5 to take turns together. But the problem is that the person who took the lead in the resistance will definitely be blown to death by General Ross, so who will take the lead? They are not superheroes, these people are all supervillains who commit great crimes. So the answer is that no one resisted. All 5 people followed General Rose's orders and pounced on the automatic laser guns. Sandman, Red Tank, and Dr. Lizard directly rushed up with the firepower of the laser gun. The laser that can easily penetrate human flesh and blood is meaningless to them. It can only fall off the Sandman. A few handfuls of sand did not leave any scars when hitting the Red Tank. Dr. Lizard was hit with a few blood holes and healed itself in a blink of an eye. When the 3 of them approached these constantly firing laser guns, they could easily crush its solid shell like mud. The Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus on the other side don't need to get close at all. The Green Goblin rides a flying skateboard to dodge the incoming laser dexterously while throwing out explosive darts to blast the laser guns into pieces one by one. Dr. Octopus used 2 sturdy mechanical tentacles to protect the body, and the remaining 2 squeeze the laser guns on top of the head one by one like picking fruits. On the monitoring screen, Chen Lu, who watched the cannon fodder squad show their power, nodded admiringly. The stronger this group of supervillains, the more valuable it is to take them away. At least every supervillain in the cannon fodder team can have the strength of the lower level of Alpha, and there are many Frankensteins who can provide significant help for research work. Let's go, Winter Soldier, the infiltration is over. Next, let's start the storm. Zzzzzz. There was another sound of metal welding on the alloy ceiling of the atrium. The pitch-black alloy wall was instantly burnt red and then gradually melted. The hot part drew an arc and slowly turned into a circle. It is impossible for an alloy of such a special material to be boiled by an ordinary military welding gun. The only thing that can achieve this effect is the blood inflammation of Chen Lu. Killian's death ray. At the moment when the circle was drawn, a metal shell like a manhole cover fell from the atrium to the bottom. The raindrops and the violent gale outside all got in one breath, followed by several special steel cables. Under the lead of the Crossbones, dozens of elite Hydra soldiers quickly slid down from the steel cables to the ground, and engaged in fierce gun battles with the jailers hiding behind the bunker. Chen Lu faced the cold wind and rain and walked to the top of the atrium, where Thunder and Killian in raincoats were waiting for his next order. The Winter Soldier returned to the Hydra team to continue his undercover mission. The four forces of Chen Lu Squad, Cannon Fodder Squad, Hydra, and Jailer are engaged in a fierce battle in this isolated island prison for their different purposes. Gunfire flickered and thunder light flickered, turning this place into a human purgatory. Cannon Fodder Team, kill these guys. General Ross still puts his hope of victory on the supervillain team he just formed. At present, these 5 supervillains are indeed the strongest line of defense in this island prison. The jailers, who were originally suppressed by the Hydra soldiers, instantly reversed the situation after joining the Cannon Fodder Squad. The Winter Soldiers and Crossbones, who are only twice as powerful as the tower level, can contain a member of the Cannon Fodder Squad. The other 4 supervillains were able to slaughter among the Hydra soldiers unscrupulously. At this time, General Ross had already hid in a special room. From the appearance, it was a special refuge to resist nuclear bomb attacks. The high temperature of blood inflammation or death rays should still be able to burn the thick refuge in a while, but the other party shouldn't watch Chen Li do it. Chen Lu looked at the members of the Cannon Fodder Squad slaughtering the Hydra soldiers like cats playing with mice, and ordered the Thunder and Killian behind him. Well, let's start the big killing. Wrapped by the Crossbones and the Winter Soldier is Dr. Lizard. These 2 experienced Hydra killers have been able to avoid Dr. Lizard's heavy blows by virtue of their dexterity and precise calculations. Seize the flaws in the opponent's offense and launch counterattacks from time to time. It is a pity that neither the Crossbones nor the Winter Soldier have the ability to cause serious trauma to the thick-skinned Dr. Lizard. 1 or 2 small wounds that are occasionally drawn are quickly affected by the extremely high healing ability brought by the opponent's lizard DNA serum. Healed easily. They can't tell the winner for a while, but there are still 4 powerful super villains like Dr. Lizard in the Cannon Fodder team. They are not opponents that ordinary soldiers can deal with, they can only be handed over to Chen Lu and mutated infection. The squad is here to solve it. Chen Lu led Thunder and Killian from the height of the atrium, and stopped in front of the Cannon Fodder team. The Thunder dual-armed tactical daggers and greeted Dr. Octopus, who was waving 4 thick mechanical tentacles. Killian used death rays to shoot at the green gob, who was flying sensitively in the air on a flying skateboard. The red tank's eyes were red, and he stepped forward and rushed towards Chen Lu, while a gust of sand was raised around the Sandman and disappeared. Red Tank, whose real name is Kane Marco, is a mutant supervillain who debuted in the movie X-Men 3: Last Stand. The ability is to make the body possess huge durability to the point where it is almost indestructible, and can even resist the bombardment of Thor's gods and the steel claws of Wolverine. Once the Red Tank runs, almost nothing can stop him. It can be called a modern version of the invincible heavy armored warrior. At this time, the Red Tank tensed the huge muscles of the whole body, and launched a death charge toward Chen Lu with a venomous face. He lowered his head with a heavy lead helmet, almost closed his eyes and sprinted forward. The extremely heavy steps on the floor can cause a slight earthquake every step of the way, and all the people and things blocking the way along the way look like the biscuit was easily crushed, as if there was nothing in the distance between him and Chen Lu. Are you a man who fights with your head? Facing the head of the Red Tank that was expanding in the field of vision, Chen Lu sneered with a cold smile. Then 2 blood-red flames spurted out from under Chen Lu's feet, making Chen Lu rise up like Iron Man's mecha thrusters, pressing the Red Tank's head in the air and turning over a caterpillar. Behind the opponent did it fall firmly to the ground. The Red Tank's full sprint obviously couldn't stop arbitrarily, and it slammed into a wall. And this wall happened to be the door of the refuge room where General Ross was hiding. Just listening to the loud noise of boom, the 23-ton special alloy gate designed to withstand nuclear bombs was knocked into a big hole by the Red Tank, and it was twisted and deformed and almost collapsed completely after a large cloud of dust was raised. However, this huge protective door incorporating black technology eventually resisted the strong collision of the Red Tank and barely maintained the safety of the refuge room. It's a pity, I thought I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Although General Rose's refuge was not directly knocked away as Chen Lu wanted, the Red Tank, an idiot with only well-developed limbs, plunged his head deeply into the deformed alloy gate and had not yet broken free. Chen Lu immediately pulled it out. Edmund Alloy Katana intends to step forward and behead it with a sword. However, before that, there was a figure lurking behind Chen Lu, who was spotted in advance by the mirror image reflected on Cheng Liang's body at the moment Chen Lu drew the sword. He turned around and killed this sneaky guy with a single knife. Unexpectedly, there was no sensation of cutting the flesh on the blade, but it felt like a loose object was slashed. This hand feeling, yes, it was the same as cutting a sandbag. Taking a closer look, this guy who was cut in half by Chen Lu was indeed a sandman who was not an ordinary flesh and blood. There was no blood coming out of the wound that was broken at the waist. Instead, there was only sand that was constantly flying away. Sandman, the supervillain who appeared in Spider-Man 3, once inadvertently broke into the desert science test site, was weathered by a particle atomizer together with the sand inside, and turned into a sandman blended with the sand. You shouldn't be afraid of nanobombs. After proving that Sandman is immune to physical attacks, Chen Lu immediately changed his strategy to question him. The distracted Sandman really eased his raised fist, and replied indifferently, "This is not the body I want, I need to be cured." "Cure, huh?" Chen Lu snorted disdainfully, but when Sandman was waiting for him to follow, Chen Lu suddenly rolled back and distanced himself. Before Sandman could understand the meaning of this action, he was smashed by the red tank rushing over from behind, and once again scattered into a cloud of dust floating in the air. After avoiding the second collision of the red tank and letting the Sandman take a shot of friendly damage by the way, Chen Lu tried to use the Edmund Alloy Samurai sword in the red that passed him by. The tank slashed, only to feel that an unmatched strange force from the knife rushed into the tiger's mouth. Instead of injuring the opponent, it almost let the weapon get out of hand. Sure enough, even the hard Edmund alloy couldn't break through the terrifying defensive power of the red tank, and a simple slash would only make you ask for trouble. The sand flying in the air also gathered again and rebuilt into the shape of a sandman not far from Chen Lu. At this time, these two supervillains were standing on both sides of Chen Lu, adjusting their state and preparing to launch a wave of teamwork flanks. Sure enough, it's a bit difficult. Being enemies with the two powerful supervillains, Sandman and Red Tank at the same time, is more difficult than Chen Lu expected. At least it has not been able to cause any effective damage to their abnormal bodies, but it is not completely impossible. Chen Lu grabbed the extremely sharp Edmund's blade with his left hand, and swiped it from the bottom to the tip of the knife like a knife. The dripping blood immediately dyed the entire blade red, and the bright red completely covered the original cold silver, making this Edmund alloy knife even more murderous. Blood inflammation high temperature cut knife. The blood-colored flames replaced the blood covering the entire blade. The weird and dazzling blood light eclipsed everything around it. The heat waves spread out one after another, making everyone feel as if they were in scarlet again. Purgatory. Chen Lu held the handle of the alloy knife with both hands. There is no other substance in the world that can withstand the high temperature of blood inflammation of tens of thousands of degrees except Edmund alloy. The red lotus ignited on this knife will give the Edmund alloy blade an even more amazingly powerful destructive power. This is not comparable to the pure physical slash just now. Chapter 91. Looking at the blazing flame chopping knife in Chen Lu's hand, the alarm instinctively sounded like crazy in Sha Ren's mind. Before Chen Lu had time to make a move, this sly guy had already generalized into a burst of untouchable sand and dispersed, not knowing where he was hiding. The sand people are timid before fighting, but the simple-minded red tank can't understand what fear is. As long as there are enemies in front of him, there is only one thing he will do: charge. Charge. There is a charge. The sound of footsteps resembling an earthquake roared again, and the red tank with greatly expanded muscles was several times more terrifying than the real tank at this time. It would give people a 10,000-ton battleship crashing into itself at full speed. The illusion is unstoppable and unmatched. The red tank let out an astonishing roar and approached Chen Lu step by step. At this time, Chen Lu held the red lotus on the blade and bloomed more happily. The Edmund alloy samurai sword entangled by the fierce blood inflammation resolutely greeted as if the red tank like a Cthulhu possessed accurately and viciously cut into the opponent's throat. The surging shock wave burst between the two, and even the raindrops poured and were shaken out of a semicircle, and the soldiers around were scared to death by the loud noise. Chen Lu gritted his teeth and pressed the tip of the knife against the red tank's throat. A large group of blood inflammation poured into the knife from the palm of the knife holding the knife, and finally went straight to the skin of the red tank. The red tank still maintained a roar like a beast, and there was no fear of being held back by a sharp blade. Instead, he used his body to press the tip of Chen Li's knife one step further. Finally, his strange power was even better. Under the incomparable aura of the red tank, Chen Lu's Edmund alloy knife was pushed out of his hand, and a pung slammed into the wall behind him. But the price was that the red tank had stopped, and a small blood stain appeared on the solid skin. Although it was only a trivial minor injury, it was enough for Chen Lu's ability. Chen Lu's fingers were pinched tightly around the neck of the red tank, and the sturdy giant was lifted up. Before the red tank reacted and began to struggle, a large amount of blood inflammation poured in from the wound on his throat, and tied him tightly from the inside like a shackle. The blood-red light became brighter and brighter through the skin, and at the moment it spread to every blood vessel in his body. Blood flame fire foil great hammer. The body of the red tank exploded with a pillar of blood-colored fire and rose into the air. The extreme blood inflammation evaporated every drop of blood in his body. Only the tough skin still retained its original shape, but the inside was basically one pile of incomplete charcoal skeletons. When it fell to the ground, the burning blood inflammation on the red tank gradually extinguished, and the huge flesh was also dried out like a leaking doll. The trigger of the virus, the target, the red tank, the zombie virus has been injected successfully, have been infected, the mutant human supervillain has mutated. Since the target is dead, the mutation speed increases. The red tank will mutate into a mutated infected person who retains the original human mind within 3 hours. Please be careful to tame it or eliminate consciousness. The cannon fodder team showed up the first victim, the red tank, who died in action. It's really troublesome, I have to move back to find Alex to reconstruct his body. After cruelly executing the red tank, Chen Lu turned his gaze to General Ross, who was aside, and picked up the alloy knife that was knocked out by the red tank. You don't need any verbal explanation to understand what he is going to do next. Even a monster like the red tank can't withstand the weird flames. How long can this nuclear explosion refuge room last? Sandman, listen to me. General Ross is worthy of being an experienced senior officer who has fought against superhumans for a long time. Even in the face of such a dangerous situation, he has always maintained his calmness. Maybe he is a little shameless, but he is still facing the present. The only Sandman who might stop Chen Lu asked for help. There is a large amount of dried sea sand stored in the warehouse in Area A, use it. Chen Lu's blood inflammation has already started to burn the steel wall of the refuge room, and the red metal spreads on the wall and infiltrates the inside of the refuge room little by little. At the same time, the temperature of this airtight refuge room rose sharply. At this moment, General Ross was like he was in a huge oven, with sweat dripping from his forehead, and his facial muscles were constantly twitching to hold back himself. An expression of pain appeared in front of the enemy. Can't you come out by yourself? While burning the copper and iron walls, Chen Lu asked the sweaty General Ross through the glass. After all, his purpose was to infect General Ross into his own hands instead of killing him directly. The zombie virus can make the infected person lose and become the zombie comes back to life, but it is not possible to infect a dead body into a zombie directly. Before General Ross is completely dead, Chen Lu must first inject the virus into his body. You don't have to count on this. General Ross resisted the intense pain of being cooked a little bit, and replied strongly to Chen Lu. General Ross may do everything, but even Chen Lu, who is his opponent, has to admit that he is a tough soldier, a piece of steel that can speak. Boom! Before Chen Lu tore the steel outer wall apart, a loud explosion-like noise suddenly came from under his feet. He quickly rolled on the spot and avoided the place where he had stepped on. A huge fist made of sand smashed the floor and rose from the ground, smashing the big hole in the ground further, and drilling out of the ground was almost filled with the entire island prison. Giants. Sand, sand, sand. Looking around, it's all sand. This is the most powerful form of the Sandman, the Giant of Sand. An exaggerated body over 20 meters high, a giant fist larger than Chen Lu's whole person, the appearance of this monster disrupted the actions of everyone present and inevitably attracted everyone's attention. With a lot of sand as a backing, the Sand People are stronger than before. In Captain America: Civil War, the giant Ant-Man once messed up superheroes such as Gears of War and Spider-Man. And now the Sandman is not only larger than the Ant-Man in the movie, but also has the characteristics of being immune to physical attacks as a sand body, changing the shape at will, and becoming even more difficult than the Ant-Man. Kwangsha roared and covered the entire ground. There is no doubt that the Sandman is the most eye-catching existence on the battlefield. Originally able to restrain the raindrops of the Sandman a little, it seemed so insignificant at this time. SHIELD, Air Carrier Operations Command Center. Nick and his spies were analyzing the 3D images of the secret research base of Hydra in Sokovia. At this time, a civilian working at the computer suddenly exclaimed and became nervous. Shouted to everyone in the meeting. "Sir, there is an urgent message from the isolated island prison. Hydra's Special Assault Force has just carried out a prison robbery." Judging from Nick's shocked expression, he almost never expected this to happen. It is true that Hydra's idea of hitting the isolated island prison is not 1 or 2 days, but how can it be pinched at this embarrassing time when he is leading the Avengers to attack their base? This is like deliberately trying to hurt both sides with SHIELD. Neither party will be the ultimate beneficiary of this action. Turn the communication to the home screen. Nick told his subordinates. If it were normal, he would have directly ordered the SHI. On the big screen of the Combat Command Center, General Ross's sweaty and anxious face immediately appeared, and the background behind him was a flush of red that made people feel sultry. "We are in trouble, Nick, very big trouble." General Ross is already quite weak, but his tone still shows no fear. "Let me see the details. Hydra should not have enough strength to break through the defense of the island prison. It's not just Hydra, but also the scientist organization AIM," General Ross said, grabbing the camera and twisting it sharply, and the screen quickly shifted to the atrium of the island prison during the fierce battle. The first thing that catches the eye is the extremely large body of the Sandman, swinging 2 huge fists, knocking the surroundings to pieces. The Green Devil's feet are on the flying skateboard and cling to the Sandman's body and dodge the base. The death ray shot by Ryan, the Crossbones and the Winter Soldier were beaten with Dr. Lizard. The 4 mechanical tentacles of Dr. Octopus soared up and down, and Thunder and Chen Lu kept walking through him and the Sandman's joint attack. My cannon fodder team is dealing with them, and with the help of the Sandman, it can still have an advantage, but I don't know if the opponent still has a back player. In short, I need support, preferably from your Avengers." Quote. Under the urging of General Ross, Nick fell into a deep entanglement. At this time, other superheroes are gathering on the aircraft carrier battle group that is about to launch an attack on New York. It will be more urgent to support the isolated island prison. With the extremely high maneuverability of the SHIELD air carrier, it was indeed time to go to support, but this move was likely to lead to a complete failure of his own raid. Apart from anything else, if Hydra has time to transfer and destroy Sokovia's zombie virus research results, then this belated raid will become meaningless. The Hydra research base in Sokovia is more important, or it is more worthwhile to keep the isolated island prison. This is where Nick needs to be carefully considered. Said it was consideration, but in fact he had no choice at all. General Ross, our Avengers are performing a secret mission. This mission is likely to directly determine the survival of the United States and even the entire human race. Even if all the supervillains in the isolated island prison are released, it will not cause more trouble than the current zombie virus. Chen Lu's corpse of zombies was driven into desperation by the world, but is it not so for the US military? Even if there is only the possibility of solving the zombie virus crisis, the Sokovia Hydra research base in front of you is more important than the hijacked island prison. Even Nick is sure that if Hydra knew that Sokovia was about to be attacked, it would never concentrate its forces on the island prison. What happened now is like someone has calculated both SHIELD and Hydra at the same time, forcing them to fight to the end. "I'm sorry, Rose." Nick clenched his fists and lowered his head to General Ross. He understood what this decision meant. The island prison would become a real island. Really, even if Nick announced his rejection, General Rose's tone remained calm. The other party was not a man who would make fun of the survival of all mankind. Rose believed that Nick did have his own reasons for such a move. This calm made Nick even more heartbroken, but the pain did not change his decision. "I hope you can live, Rose." "It's okay, I've realized it a long time ago." Only these words were left, and the communication screen was disconnected and plunged into darkness again. The melee in Gudao prison is still going on. Sand is dominated. The Green Devils and Dr. Octopus are constantly cooperating with him to launch a fierce attack on Chen Lu and others. Sand fists, green magic darts, mechanical tentacles, and a variety of offensives are mixed, leaving countless pits and pits in the atrium of the isolated island prison. The huge Sandman became more violent and reckless, accompanied by a terrifying roar, swinging a giant fist like a demolition iron ball, sweeping across the inner wall of the isolated island prison, crushing countless metal single rooms. The cell, of course, includes the prisoners who failed to escape. Flesh, steel and glass, everything is easily crushed like recyclable garbage. If Chen Lu hadn't dodged alertly, he might still be in the group of scrap metal just now. The robotic arm on Killian's shoulder fired a dazzling yellow-red high-temperature laser, burning a crystal-clear wound on the Sandman's arm. This is the sand that has turned into transparent glass under the burning of the death rays. Dao's small wound is undoubtedly a drop in the bucket for Sha Ren's huge body. Immediately the green gob sprinted over and flew over, and the bomb dart came out and exploded Killian upside down, falling from the upper floor to the bottom of the courtyard. Sharon quickly took the opportunity to trample Killian to death like a cockroach. The huge soles of the feet were raised high and followed by a meteorite that fell from the sky, leaving a depression on the ground larger than a dinosaur footprint. However, before Killian was stepped on, Chen Lu drove the blood inflammation from under his feet, pushed his body with flames into the gap between the soles of Sandman's feet and the ground, and pulled Killian from the gate at a critical moment. Came back. Chen, this thing is a real monster. Kirian, who was supported by Chen Lu's shoulders, looked up at the huge Sandman and said, I'm afraid it will be difficult to burn him to death with our firepower. I didn't say I would do this. Chen Lu looked at the seawater seeping from the footprints of the Sandman on the ground, and said thoughtfully. Don't forget that we are at sea. Chen, what do you want to do? With the great activity of the cannon fodder squad, especially the Sand People, the battle situation has clearly shifted to the jailer's side. If you don't want to get rid of these tricky guys anymore, this jail robbery will turn into a stupid death-seeking operation. Behaved. More and more sand was swallowed by the Sandman, his huge body continued to grow, and the wounds caused by Killian's death ray were quickly refilled with sand. This sand giant is becoming more difficult to deal with. He spread his 5 fingers like a giant mountain, and slapped a few Hydra soldiers like a mosquito. Accompanied by the severe wind rolled up with the palms of the palms, the few unlucky soldiers turned into a mass of plasma on the ground before they even hum. I'll be too late, Killian, I need your help here, but you still need a little mobility. Chen Lu glanced at the green goblin flying all over his head, his eyes focused on the green goblin. On the flying skateboard under my feet, that thing is pretty good. At this time, the one who is fighting with the green demon is Chen Lu's beautiful mutant infected Thunder. She is running vertically on the inner wall of the isolated island prison like Spider-Man, so as to reach the same height as the green demon to avoid the opponent condescending advantage. Of course, this is not Spider-Man's spider crawling ability. Thunder only relies on its own bioelectric control ability to activate or deactivate the electromagnetic force of the dagger tied to its feet, so that it can walk on metal surfaces. Resolve the Green Devil, receive it. The 2 military daggers with electric light drew 2 bolts of lightning to take the Green Devil's forehead, but unfortunately the opponent twisted his head and easily escaped. Immediately afterwards, the thunder was full of dazzling yellow electric currents, and Lei Ting leapt gracefully from the wall. With his hands crossed, he clenched 2 tactical sabers, hung upside down in the air and cut it hard at the Green Devil's throat. And the Green Demon was not waiting for a moment. The Taito, who pulled out the green blade from behind, drove the aircraft to greet him. The blades met with violent sparks, and they tried to suppress each other without giving way. But Thunder suddenly let go of his hand, and the 2 daggers that were magnetically charged by the electric current immediately stuck tightly to the Green Goblin's tachi, and then dexterously stepped on his skateboard lightly, pulling away from the Green Goblin. The Green Gob was shocked that the situation was not right, and a burst of sound came from behind him. At the beginning, the 2 daggers that also carried electric currents thrown by Thunder had turned back, and they stabbed the Green Gob in the back under the guidance of magnetic force. The electric light spread across the Green Devil's body in an instant. On the ground in the melee, Dr. Octopus waved his steel tentacles to find Chen Lu's trouble. He used 2 tentacles to support his body and moved at high speed on the ground or on the wall. The other 2 mechanical tentacles turned into his arms, launching precise and fierce attacks continuously. Dr. Octopus, this supervillain with 4 sturdy mechanical tentacles, first appeared in the movie, Spider-Man 2. Originally an outstanding nuclear energy physicist, he was unfortunately caught in an experimental accident after inventing this group of powerful mechanical tentacles, each capable of lifting 8 tons of heavy objects. The radiation leakage caused by the rupture of the wire tube made the 4 mechanical tentacles and his body completely merged. In other words, it made him a complete Frankenstein, which led to the birth of the supervillain, Dr. Octopus. He is just a poor bug driven crazy by his own technology. Go away. Chen Lu didn't intend to waste the world with this little character. He swung the blood-flaming Edmund alloy samurai sword and slashed it cleanly towards a mechanical tentacle. Although the strength and durability of Dr. Octopus's steel tentacles are first-class levels in machinery, they have not been able to use the high-end products of Edmund alloy, such as aliens from the sky, not to mention the fierce blood inflammation on the blade. Up. The sturdy tentacles were cut in 2 pieces under Chen Lu's knife like sashimi. A large number of wire tubes were exposed on the red cross-section, and then they were burned to ashes. Ah! Dr. Octopus uttered a scream of tearing heart. You must know that his mechanical tentacles are directly connected to his nerve circuits. It seems that the blow just now brought great stimulation to his nervous system, of course. It won't be a good thing. Under the severe pain, Dr. Octopus's actions became irritable and unstable. The other 3 steel tentacles began to fly around. Even the jailers of the isolated island prison were knocked down by him. The huge force directly destroyed these people. The cloth was smashed to the wall. This kind of violent anger gave Chen Lu a little inspiration. Thunder. There is no need for Chen Lu to continue to give detailed instructions. Lei Ting already tacitly jumped over to Dr. Octopus's head. She is very clear about what her abilities can be used for, which is why Chen Lu likes to take her to act together. Use Chen Lu to contain the gap of Dr. Octopus. Lei Ting successfully approached Dr. Octopus's body and pressed his thin white fingers on the opponent's head. Then the electric light was blazing, and the surging electric current directly passed through Dr. Octopus's brain, seizing his consciousness in an instant, causing the body to slowly paralyze. But this is not the whole plan. The show has just begun. After Dr. Octopus lost consciousness, the mechanical tentacles that should have stopped moving only paused and then immediately resumed action. However, the target of this tentacles was no longer the original Chen Lu, but was used by Thunder with a charged dagger. Paralyzed the green demon floating in the air. The so-called biosignal is essentially a kind of bioelectricity. The steel tentacles directly connected to the nervous system of Dr. Octopus are actually controlled by bioelectricity. So this happened to be in the arms of Thunder, who has the ability to control bioelectricity. With the help of Tony in the zombie spirit link, Thunder quickly mastered the technique of using bioelectricity to control mechanical tentacles, and successfully won the invention of Dr. Octopus on the spot. Self-use. The Green Devil had just recovered from the current paralysis. Before he could react to the development of the situation, he was grabbed by the tentacles of Dr. Octopus, who was still a teammate, slammed it to the ground, and hit the ground with a loud crash. The neck was almost directly broken. The 4 pliers on the mechanical tentacles firmly fixed his body, and with the Green Devil's physical ability, he couldn't easily break free. And the Green Devil's aircraft, after sliding in the air for a few more times, was caught and stepped on by Killian, who had been prepared. Okay, now I can fly, but it's a bit unstable. Killian kept shaking his body to maintain balance on the flying skateboard, while trying the various buttons above to try to master its operating skills. Chen, what's next? Let's kill this big guy. Chen Lu lit up a lot of blood inflammation from his hands and feet, and quickly rose into the air under the propelling force of the flame, just like the propelling aircraft on Iron Man's mecha. In fact, Chen Lu also used the metallization ability to simulate the mini-jet propulsion designed by Tony, and then flew with hematitis as fuel. The speed is even faster than Iron Man, but at the same time the consumption is extremely huge, and it can consume the biological energy in Chen Lu's body at most for half an hour. Sharon obviously didn't like this kind of small bugs that would fly around. He opened his huge palm that could crush a car like a children's toy car, and slapped Chen Lu with a bad breath and a terrifying wind. Tucked him into the palm of his hand and then slapped him fiercely into the metal inner wall, scratching a deep long hole in the steel wall. But immediately, flames burst out between the fingers of the Sandman's palm on the wall. The extreme high temperature instantly melted the sand into diamond-like crystal glass, and the crystallized glass followed the Sandman's palm. It spread up and was quickly swallowed by half of his arm. Looking in through the transparent glass giant hand, Chen Lu pulled out the Edmund alloy samurai sword with a strong wave, and a large number of cracks broke on the fragile glass immediately, and it collapsed quickly, and a burst of glass was lifted on the ground. Scum heavy rain. For the Sandman who was close to the immortal body, it was actually just a little loss of sand, but it would take more than 10 seconds to repair an arm. This is a precious gap. Killian, do it. While Chen Lu was yelling, Killian drove the Green Goblin's flying skateboard dexterously to go behind the Sandman. The mechanical arm on his shoulder was fully powered, bursting out a dazzling orange-red death ray, slowly on the ground drag and draw a semicircular arc. Upon seeing this, Chen Lu drove Shuiyan down until he was close to the ground for ultra-low altitude flight. He stabbed the Edmund alloy katana wrapped in inflammation into the ground until it reached the handle, and melted the metal ground with high temperature in a semicircular shape. The arc-shaped trajectory drags along. Wow, even if the Sandman became less clear-headed, he could realize what the two men were thinking about. He was about to raise his only left arm to hit the two nasty bugs heavily, and he was immediately caught. Thunder controlled the three mechanical tentacles of Dr. Octopus and jumped onto the body to be entangled. Each steel tentacles that can withstand 8 tons of strange power is inevitably gradually deformed and damaged under the terrifying power of the sand giant, but it has indeed successfully delayed the Sandman's offensive action. Using the space created by Thunder, Chen Lu and Killian successfully burned a huge red circle on the ground that was large enough to hold Sandman's whole body. Due to the further melting of the high temperature, the floor finally couldn't bear the super high weight of the sand giant, and collapsed along the circle drawn by Chen Lu and Killian. As soon as Sha Talent broke free from the control of the mechanical tentacles, he immediately fell into the big hole under his feet, and a loud noise rolled up the nearly 10-meter high waves, and everyone near the big hole was soaked. Shui, this is the enemy of the Sandman in his life. Once the sand manipulated by the Sandman is soaked, he will lose control completely, he cannot change its shape or rebuild his body, and he can only let the water wash his whole body away. Before completely falling into the sea, the remaining left hand of the sand giant still held the ground of the isolated island prison, which was considered as preventing the Sandman from falling into the water. However, this part of the sand was also completely wet by the seawater splashing from his body, and it could not be restored to its original body before it dried out. Such a big movement naturally attracted the attention of Dr. Lizard. He was able to stabilize the Winter Soldier and the Crossbones. After finding that the fighting cannon fodder team was only himself alone, he was soon defeated by the timidity of the contest. It's up. Just as he flicked his tail and crossed the Winter Soldier to flee, he turned around and saw that Chen Lu's Edmund alloy samurai sword had been placed on his neck. Dr. Lizard returned to a human form from the original lizard form, and cowered and asked Chen Lu, "Can we talk about it?" Chen Lu glanced at him indifferently, drew the knife sharply, and Dr. Lizard's head was thrown high and then fell to the ground while the blood was splashing. Chen Lu swung the knife to the ground again, and the blood on the blade formed a bloodline on the ground, leaving no trace of blood on the silver knife. Seeing that his cannon fodder squad had been wiped out, General Ross, who had to hide in a hell-like nuclear explosion shelter, desperately closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Now the communicator sighed. On August 13, 2009, New York time, the isolated island prison was declared lost. The attacker was a joint force of the Hydra Organization and the Scientist Organization AIM. In order to avoid an extreme situation, the Thunder Plan SCOOO emergency was applied. Agreement, please reply as soon as possible. On the other side of the communicator came an instant message reply from the current U.S. President. Mr. President's tone was calm on the surface, but with a hint of anxiety. Approval. Among the U.S. military, only nuclear weapons are allowed to be used only after obtaining the personal approval of the President of the United States. And in this isolated island prison, there is indeed such a powerful monster that reaches the level of nuclear weapons abomination. The pure Edmund alloy chains that bound the hatred were untied layer by layer, and this terrifying monster was striding towards freedom step by step. In the end, this super monster with gray skin and fin-like bone spurs on his back, as strong as the Hulk, stood in front of Chen Lu. The hideous face and tight body exude strong hostility all the time. "Ross, you are finally willing to let me out. I said long ago, you will definitely do this." He took an exaggerated step proudly and walked to the side of the nuclear explosion shelter where General Rose was, with a hoarse voice. The voice said to him. General Rose looked at the hatred coldly, with a vague look in his eyes. I just don't want you to fall into the enemy's hands. After all, you used to be a good soldier. I made you. I know what kind of situation. You will be more dangerous. I will no longer be controlled by anyone. Anyone. Loathing roared and slammed a punch on the door of General Rose's refuge room. The thick door that even the red tank couldn't hit with a single blow was easily crushed into a discus under the seemingly careless punch of loathing. It is a terrifying monster with the power equal to or even surpassing the Hulk, and the power of a single blow is so terrifying. Abomination, the final villain in the movie, Invincible Hulk, formerly known as Emil Bronsky. He was originally a special soldier under General Ross. In order to complete the task of capturing the Hulk, he received a super soldier serum injection, but he still lost to the powerful and terrifying Hulk. Later, Emil discovered the instrument that Bruce Banner used to release gamma rays and used it to test on himself. After receiving a dose equal to the gamma rays radiated when Bruce Banner became the Hulk, he was permanently arrested. The Earth became a huge gray-skinned monster. Since then, Hulk has added a supervillain whose strength is equal to him. Abomination. At the end of Invincible Hulk, Hatred was defeated by the infinitely increasing Hulk, and was bypassed by Hulk under the pleading of General Rose's daughter. After that, he was kept in this isolated island prison by General Rose. Now that General Rose let him out, he was just trying to prevent this guy from falling into the hands of Hydra and becoming a more tricky and deadly weapon. Apart from anything else, just the strength that can confront the Hulk head-on, has a level of combat effectiveness comparable to nuclear weapons. Even if everyone present joins forces, they may not be able to subdue this super creature with infinite weird power. If you know that Hulk in the normal state can also have the strength of Thor's level, then it is self-evident how strong it can suppress Hulk's hatred. General Ross also determined that Hatred would be a more terrifying threat than the Hulk, and joined forces with the Hulk for the first time, and sent Hatred into this island prison. Even if the Thunder Project was launched, he did not dare to include this uncontrollable untimed bomb into his cannon fodder team. Emil, you are not worthy of this power, so you will never be free. Even if his hiding place has been destroyed, General Rose has no intention of surrendering. Under the abhorrence of that huge and terrifying body, his body still looks so tall. The Hatred at this time only needed a light palm to turn this weak ordinary human into meat sauce, but he did not do so. Although he can never change back into a human form, he can still maintain a clear mind and thinking after he is transformed. Where is Hulk? Take me over. Abomination roared loudly, and the air of speech could raise a violent wind. Sokovia, if you move faster, maybe you can still see him. Seeing that the time is right, Chen Lu stood up and said. Since there is currently no way to defeat Hatred, lead him to someone who can defeat him. This is Chen Lu's current strategy. If Hatred and the Hulk can both lose, it would be better for Chen Lu. Wait, Sokovia. Crossbones immediately realized that something was wrong. He rushed up and grabbed Chen Lu's clothes and asked loudly, why did the Hulk appear in Sokovia? Are you thinking about it? What? Cough cough. The Crossbones turned around questioningly, staring incredulously at the Winter Soldier who stabbed the dagger into his heart from behind, and the opponent was still very strangely pressing his right hand on the back of the Crossbones, and then stabbed the dagger from the back of his hand. Jin pierced his palm with the heart of the Crossbones. The Winter Soldier Crossbones did not expect that the Winter Soldier who had been brainwashed and manipulated could betray him, but his brain was no longer able to think about the reasons for it, and he collapsed on the ground weakly. Since the Winter Soldier's dagger was first pierced into his palm and into the body of the Crossbones were also successfully infected by the zombie virus through the bloodstream. The surviving Hydra soldiers were also quickly solved by Killian and Thunder. Under Thunder's bioelectric sensing capabilities, these normal human-level soldiers were invisible and basically had no power to fight back. Everything happened in a flash. After that, the only people who can stand in the atrium in the isolated island prison are the confrontational Hatred, General Ross, and the four-person team led by Chen Lu. Who are you? He hated the cruel young man who had hurt the assassin of his partner who was a comrade in arms a moment ago, and turned to him and asked curiously. Someone killed by Hydra, nothing more. In the face of anyone asking about his identity, Chen-Lu will habitually run the train with his mouth full, and his vague words sometimes have unexpected effects. This has been proved in Nick. Seeing that Chen-Lu didn't mean to continue speaking, the hatred stopped asking questions. He turned around and held General Ross in his palm like a doll, ready to leave this isolated island prison. Mouthly murmured to himself, "Sokovia, I know this place. But you don't know the exact location of Hulk, maybe you still need a little help." Chen-Lu tried to tempt debate. At this time, he was like a super salesman saying, "Please sign a contract with me," trying to make the actions of hatred more controllable, of course, to push him further into the abyss. Disgust shook his head, and said with a grinning smile, "No need, I will make trouble until he comes out. Of course, if I don't find him, I will come back to you." Abandoning this sentence, he made a leap of hatred, and took General Ross, who was pinched into a coma, flew more than 2 kilometers away, and plunged into the distant sea level. But less than a second later, he broke the waves again from the bottom of the sea, leaping back and forth at high speed in the vast ocean like this. This method of transcending the ocean is only a trivial matter for hatred, but it suffers from General Ross, who was taken away by him. He constantly wakes up under severe pain and ushered in a new round of severe pain. This kind of sourness is definitely no better than the world. Any kind of torture comes easily. It's very troublesome for Ross to be taken away. Chen-Lu exclaimed as he looked at the distance. He can understand the reason that hatred took away General Rose, but he wanted to use Rose's long-term experience against the Hulk to fight against Hulk. Although the appearance of Abomination has become reckless and fierce, he is a special soldier who is good at combat after all. If it weren't for Hulk's unforgettable hatred, presumably hatred would be the enemy that caused Chen-Lu's headache. With the addition of hatred, Sokovia's battlefield will undoubtedly become more chaotic, and it is more suitable for Chen-Lu to fish in troubled waters. How much surprise can a monster with strength comparable to the Hulk bring? A new storm will come again. After the hatred left, the entire isolated island prison was finally completely brought under Chen-Lu's control. Both the guards and the attacking Hydra soldiers had been slaughtered by him. The super-villains who have joined or not yet joined the cannon fodder squad can only be at the mercy of Chen-Lu at this time. In addition to the Red Tanks, Crossbones, Green Devils, Dr. Octopus, Dr. Lizard and other super-villains who participated in the battle, Chen-Lu also discovered that the Wandering Whip, the Shockwave Girl, the Toad Man, and the Hedgehog who were still in the cell were also doing evil things. But the super-villain is slightly inferior to the cannon fodder team. They may be candidates for the next stage of General Ross's plan, but now they will naturally be transformed into new mutant infected by Chen-Lu's virus. It is much easier to make these prisoners surrender than to get a superhero, and General Rose has also used the cannon fodder team to prove this. The result of this prison robbery operation is undoubtedly a crazy harvest. It has never appeared in the Marvel movie universe before so many super-villains can gather together. Super League of Heroes vs. Supervillains, a huge human army and a terrifying army of zombies. New York is about to usher in an unprecedented battle of the century. The soaked sand left by the Sandman moved a little, which means that in the near future, this undead monster will recover from the sand again. But during this period of time, Chen-Lu had plenty of time to seize his handle Sha Ren's daughter. With the help of the SHIELD intelligence network, Eagle Eye, any ordinary American citizen will be under Chen-Lu's eyes. There is nowhere to hide. The Sandman who returned again would only become another piece of Chen-Lu's chess piece. Move all the useful guys to the ship, and let us prepare to evacuate. Chen-Lu ordered Kyrian, the Winter Soldier, and Thunder. After explaining the follow-up arrangements, he returned to the military first. On the transport boat, transfer the consciousness to the SHIELD aircraft carrier. SHIELD, Air Carrier Operation Command Room. Everyone from SHIELD is keeping a close eye on the surveillance situation of the isolated island prison shown on the big screen. It is a pity that from the moment that Abomination appeared on the stage and hit the nuclear explosion refuge room, the only one in the entire prison had not been taken. The hacked camera of the Winter Soldier was also badly damaged, and it was no longer possible to know what happened next. The whereabouts of General Ross, Hydra's further actions, and the hatred of being included in the enemy's command, these SHIELD people are ignorant. And in this video, the most dazzling thing is undoubtedly the figure of the young sword-wielding man who is manipulating the weird blood-colored flame and defeating powerful enemies one after another. Anyone can see that he is the key person who can influence the battle the most, and Nick feels a headache because of his incomprehensible strength. Of course, there is another reason. Even though the boy covered his face with a mask, his size is too similar to Chen Li, who just joined the Avengers. Looking at the powerful figure in the prison video, Nick asked the staff around him in a daze, "Is there anything unusual about the newcomer named Chen?" The S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who was in charge of monitoring Chen Lu looked at the surveillance video in Chen Lu's room and replied, "No, sir. No signs of communication have been found, so far there is nothing unusual." Nick also thinks his guess is a bit ridiculous. How could they be the same person? The performance of superpowers alone is not right, let alone S.H.I.E.L.D. has been monitoring Chen Lu's actions. There may be some connections between the two, but the situation in the lone prison is not suitable for spreading until the end of Sokovia's operation. Not only does it greatly affect morale, but with Captain America's upright character, it is also unclear whether he will bring the Avengers to do something stupid. Okay, order all members of the Avengers to prepare for battle, and the decapitation operation is about to begin. Nick still intends to find a solution by himself without the superheroes, and the top priority is to capture the Hydra base in the Sokovia area. Calm down. At this time, Chen Lu's consciousness just returned to his personal room in the air carrier. During the time his consciousness left, his body was not motionless, but continued to be maintained under the guidance of other people in the zombie's spiritual link. Because of the daily life behavior, Chen Lu's behavior will be free from any abnormality from the monitoring point of view. The deputy director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Bureau Hill knocked on the door and walked in. With a gentle smile on her face, the strong woman came to Chen Lu and asked him kindly, "How is it, Chen? War is about to start, do you feel nervous?" Chen Lu responded coldly, "I have experienced more severe scenes than this. This is nothing at all. I am also eager to avenge the Hydra, for my best friend, or brother. If you were required to kill with a pistol at the age of 8, and forced to kill each other with a close friend who grew up with you, at the age of 12, you would have to perform an independent assassination mission and eventually escape the organization's control exhaustedly. If you are shot to death on the street by a group of gangsters, you will understand what cruelty is." This passage is the experience of the Hydra Slayer that Chen Lu told Tony at the beginning, and Hill was naturally told clearly. Hill couldn't think of any comforting words for the young man who had seen the darkness of the world before him. Okay. After sighing softly, Hill shook his head and opened the suitcase she had brought with it, which contained a series of high-tech military devices that were confused. "Now you are a member of the Avengers. Although not much, there are some standard equipment here. Be careful, don't mess around." Hill used her fingers to pinch a black square the size of a grain of rice, and carefully stuffed it into Chen Lu's ear. After confirming that the installation was completed, she explained to Chen Lu in detail, "This is a special communicator implanted in the tympanic membrane. It can directly vibrate the tympanic membrane in your ear to spread the sound so that you can communicate with other members. The entire S.H.I.E.L.D. people are in the same communication channel, and occasionally need maintenance, but it should not affect your movements." It turns out that this is the reason why the superheroes in Marvel movies can communicate remotely without headphones. It is not that they do not have a communicator but are invisible on the outside. This communicator may also have the function of monitoring the actions of various personnel, but as far as the metallization ability is concerned, even if it is not taken off, it can easily be wrapped with biometal to shield the signal of this small communicator. "What, do you feel any discomfort?" Hill asked Chen Lu by shaking Chen Lu's head slightly. "No, this is much better than putting a nano bomb in your ear." After installing the tympanic communicator, Hill took out an electronic chip card from the suitcase and handed it to Chen Lu's hand. "This is a blue electronic card with the S.H.I.E.L.D. Eagle logo, except for the functional barcode. Mind you explain what this is?" Chen Lu asked, looking at the small blue card. As Hill closed the suitcase, he explained, "The S.H.I.E.L.D. Security Level 2 ID card is basically regarded as a regular employee of S.H.I.E.L.D. You can investigate the information through S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Level 2 security agreement. Or in and out of the area. Show them to senior U.S. military officers and they can also verify your identity and provide assistance. Your military rank is at the rank of U.S. military major, but ordinary soldiers will not know it. Chen Lu once learned from Eagle Eye that the security authority of S.H.I.E.L.D. is divided into 5 levels. At present, the Level 2 security authority owned by Chen Lu can only find some superficial S.H.I.E.L.D. information and access to some of the more well-known restricted areas. For example, the White House, the 3-wing building of S.H.I.E.L.D., etc. Captain America has a higher level of Level 3 security authority, able to get a rough understanding of some classified information, as well as access to some more sensitive areas such as Insight Project, isolated island prisons and the like. Senior S.H.I.E.L.D. agents such as Hawkeye, Hill, and Black Widow and Tony, ASHI, confirm that there are even sensitive areas that no one knows about, such as the Illumination Program, Area 51, etc. The highest Level 5 security authority is held by the current S.H.I.E.L.D. Director Nick Fury and the current U.S. President. That is, only the highest level U.S. managers will be granted this type of authority, and they can visit all strategic areas and others at will. Sensitive data. Among them, there are naturally many government scandals that are enough to cause a worldwide sensation, such as the Hope Town experiment, the real Apollo project, and so on. As for the black light plan pursued by La Chen, only people with this level of security authority are eligible to obtain it. In short, raising this level of security authority is beneficial and harmless for Chen Lu. While getting closer to the black light virus, it will also be more convenient to enter and exit some sensitive areas for follow-up actions. If unfortunately, Chen Lu won the S.H.I.E.L.D. 5 level security authority, even the leak of U.S. classified information can cause a storm. Come with me, you still need a suit before you officially join the war, otherwise our special agent will treat you as a civilian and evacuate. Hill interrupted Chen Lu's thoughts and led him to the bottom of the S.H.I.E.L.D. aircraft carrier. After a while, Chen Lu followed Hill to a room that looked like an armory. The walls were covered with all kinds of strange weapons and firearms. A closer look at the bows and quiver commonly used by Hawkeye, and the Vengeance, the huge rocket-sized gun used by Agent Coulson to aim at Loki in League of Heroes 1, is also included in this list. I have to feel that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s weapon technology is indeed a level higher than the normal army. Alright, Chen, stand on top. Hill pointed to a 3D printer-like instrument located in the center of the room and said, it seems that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s dressing method is not going to take an unusual way. So Chen Lu walked into the center of the printer of this instrument, and a blue light slowly dropped from the top of his head. The moment the light touched Chen Li's body, a special set of clothing was quickly formed, and his clothes were replaced from head to toe. This is a full-body gray-black tactical stealth suit. Each joint has light armor and protective gear but basically does not affect normal operations. The clothes have multiple slightly hidden equipment hanging slots, which can carry multiple pieces of special equipment without looking bloated. There is also a mask-like mask that covers the face very intimately to prevent anyone from seeing his true face clearly. After putting on this suit, Chen Lu's temperament has been transformed into a low-key, steady and reliable agent aura similar to the protagonist Sam Fisher in Split Cell, may disappear at any time, but he can appear in the most critical place at any time, a secret and deadly mysterious killer, and sometimes even his teammates can't realize his existence. Hill looked up and down Chen Lu's dress, and said with satisfaction, I heard that you have received assassin training for the Winter Soldier. I think this tactical stealth suit will suit you very well. It looks really good. Of course, this is more than just a thing. It looks good. There are Kevlar materials in the interlayer of the clothes to protect against small firearms bullets, as well as expanded polytetrafluoroethylene barriers and nanoscale graphite powder coatings, which can block heat rays and radar radiation. Basically any scanning instrument is used and there is scrap iron in front of you. This is indeed what I need. Although I had expected that the fake killer identity would make S.H.I.E.L.D. arrange itself in the direction of covert operations, Chen Lu did not expect to get this. Excellent stealth props. For Chen Lu, who intends to let the two sides fight each other and fish in troubled waters, a stealth suit that can disappear from the battlefield at any time is really a wonderful match. If I sneak, how do you find me? In order to understand the level of surveillance of S.H.I.E.L.D., Chen Lu asked again tentatively. There is GPS positioning on the communicator, and we can determine your location at any time. Hill replied very simply. Then there is no problem. It should be very common for the communicator to malfunction a little during the fierce battle. Also, Take this. Hill put a special dagger with a long handle and not too sharp on the table, and said to Chen Lishu, "This is a non-lethal stun dagger, usually you don't use it directly. The enemy is stabbed to death, and when it touches the opponent, it can release a paralyzing electric shock and stun him for a long time. I don't mean to prohibit you from killing people completely, but please try not to kill at least the captain is more taboo about this, he may like to save people more than murder." "I understand." Chen Lu took the stun dagger and stuffed it into the dagger hanging slot around his waist. For those who don't need to be infected, they can use this weapon to get rid of them. Killing has always been a means rather than an end. Chen Lu himself is not a bloodthirsty person. After the retaliatory killing of that group of punks in the first place led to today's severe situation, he has become more cautious about whether to use lethal force. Of course, Chen Lu would never hesitate when he needed to kill a killer. "That's all I need to remind you. You can pick any weapons here. After 10 minutes, all the combat personnel need to gather in the landing pod. Get ready for a big fight, man." Hill dropped this sentence, left the arsenal. Now that he got Hill's approval, Chen Lu would naturally not be polite. "After first matching myself with a deadly military dagger and a few smoke bombs, I fixed my eyes on the super gun on the weapon rack, which is the ultimate weapon, which is comparable to the terrifying caliber of a bazooka, bar on the side. Compared with special anti-material sniper rifles, they are similar to children's toy guns. The code name of this weapon is BFG. It is a prototype made by SHI. On top of military individual weapons, the modern main battle tank is just one shot in front of this thing. If the head is ruthless enough, it will be like playing a high-altitude fighter. For the old law that lacks effective ultra-long-range killing ability, it will be a good output ability supplement." Hung the BFG on the main weapon hanger on the back, and Chen Lu formally walked out of the weapon arsenal fully armed. The landing module of the shield aircraft carrier is at the bottom of the deck. It is a sealed large square filled with special vehicles such as maglev fighters, modified Hummers and special operations motorcycles. Before Chen Lu arrived, others participated in the operation. The members of the Avengers and concentrated in front of Nick. Because some personnel need to join the U.S. aircraft carrier battle group, the only Avengers present are Captain America, Bruce Banner, Thor, and Black Widow. However, this operation was supported by a large number of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and was not a lone battle of superheroes. When Chen Lu appeared on the stage, everyone's reaction was to glance at him casually, then turn around indifferently, and then realize that this low-key agent was their new member Chen Lu, looking at him in surprise. He approached silently step by step. At this time, Chen Lu is like a black and white character in a color movie. A casual glance will only make people feel dazzled. Only after confirming his existence will he marvel at how extraordinary his dress is. "Is there anything on my face?" Chen Lu asked everyone watching him. Under the mosque's occlusion adjustment, his voice became mature and full of magnetism, which was impressive but difficult to describe its precise characteristics. "Except for almost not recognizing who you are, nothing else." Captain America joked jokingly. "Well, Avengers, we should talk about the battle plan." Seeing that the Avengers were assembled, Nick ordered loudly. A three-dimensional scan map of Sokovia's terrain immediately appeared in front of everyone. Nick pointed to a medieval castle built on a cliff on the three-dimensional map and explained. "This is the goal of this operation, the Hydra's secret research base. Don't think it's the size of this old castle. They actually hollowed out the entire mountain. The entire mountain you see is theirs. There may be a fully armed army hidden in the base of China. In order to prevent the zombie virus research materials we need from being buried by this mountain, we cannot carry out large-scale fire bombing. The only way is to let the infantry attack. This will cost us a lot of people," Captain America said worriedly, looking at the S.H.I.E.L.D. soldiers assembled behind him. "If you work hard enough, then you won't." Nick stretched his finger to the dense forest area near the castle on the three-dimensional map. The map shows that there are still many checkpoints and fortresses. Obviously Hydra has not relaxed the defense here. This may not be considered a defensive loophole, but it is already the weakest area of the base defense. We will land here, hoping to catch the opponent by surprise. Finally, Nick scanned the faces of everyone present, and his gaze finally stopped on Chen Lu's face. "Following our instructions, let us kick Hydras fiercely. And the captain, you come up. Say a few words." Under the reverent gaze of everyone, Captain America stepped forward and began the final mobilization. You heard, this will not be a simple battle. Some of you may stay in this place forever, but the price of freedom is high, and it has always been the case. The first order: if they want to hit you, you will fight back. They want your life, grit your teeth and keep on. All the soldiers present showed knowing smiles. This is the usual style of Captain America. He tells you to cherish your life, but also encourages you to sacrifice for your ideals. But as far as Chen Lu is concerned, it will naturally not be touched. After all the matters were explained, the soldiers boarded the vehicles one after another to prepare for the attack. Chen Lu found a special operations motorcycle. After all, his purpose of action was not suitable for working with large forces. Shield, positioning Chen Lu as a stealth agent, would not say much. Only Captain America was slightly dissatisfied with this. He said to Chen Lu in the distance. I thought you would act with us. Chen Lu smiled, pointed to her ear and said, for me, this is a joint action. As a sound of mechanical friction sounded, the landing module of the Sky aircraft carrier slowly opened, and the cold wind from outside swept in, causing the room temperature inside to drop by more than 10 degrees. For Sokovia, located at a high altitude, it is already the snowy season. The dense forest underneath is covered by layers of ice and snow, and the ancient castle in the distance can only see a white piece. The heavy snowfall is undoubtedly a good thing for the raiders, and the tires of the vehicle have long been replaced with non-slip. It's just that how many enemy troops are hidden between the ice and snow has become unknown. Target: Sokovia. Avengers, let's go. Inspired by the loud voice of Captain America, the roar of the motor instantly dissipated the surrounding cold, and the maglev fighter, heavy Hummer, and agent motorcycle started at full speed and rushed out of the landing cabin, and fell into the dense forest area in the cold winter like dumplings. There was no need to open the parachute. With good shock-absorbing performance and a thick layer of white snow on the ground, Chen Lu steadily landed on the ground in the dense forest on a motorcycle. The other experienced shield soldiers were quite dexterously avoiding the dense branches, landed on the ground and began to gather. On the other hand, Chen Lu swung the front of the car and drove in the opposite direction of the gathering of the large forces. After a while, no one could see him again. Only the GPS positioning system on the aircraft carrier in the sky had a solitary red dot. Indicates his existence. Nick doesn't intend to say anything more about this. For those who have not received his own system training, it is better to let him play freely. On the contrary, Nick's purpose for letting Chen Lu attack is only to make Chen Lu use actions to show that he has officially and completely broken with Hydra. Hydra's secret base underground fortress. The roar of cannons shook the gray walls, and a large amount of dust fell sparsely. The ceiling was shaking constantly, as if it would completely collapse in the next second. All the objects around seemed to be trembling, and it couldn't stop its trembling at all. Return to their respective posts immediately. This is not a drill, we are under attack. We are under attack. The loud broadcast alarm sounded in every corner of the fortress. The soldiers hurriedly removed their guns from the weapon racks, and had to rush to the battlefield without time to check their equipment. In addition to the ordinary infantry, rocket pilots equipped with individual combat flight packs and main battle tanks equipped with electromagnetic pulse main guns also launched motors from various exits of the fort and swarmed toward the shield vehicle in the distance. The army greeted it. Hydra's various war machines are operating at full speed to defend this vital research base. This time is not a local battle where you punch and kick me, but a war involving a large number of soldiers charging bravely. The head of the base, Baron Strack, hurried to the combat command center and asked the busy logistics staff, who is launching the attack. How many people are there? What is the current situation? Sir, it is S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers. It is estimated that there will be more than 300 people. They will be airborne deep in the dense forest. The guards on the periphery are resisting stubbornly. The follow-up troops will be able to support the front line immediately. At present, our number is dominant. They don't seem to plan to use heavy fire bombing. After learning the news, Baron Strack turned to his confidant, Dr. Rubik's Cube, and said in a low voice, "They must have been directed at Loki's scepter. Why is the location here exposed to S.H.I.E.L.D. knows?" Loki's scepter, which runs through the two artifacts of the Avengers, is held by Loki, the final villain of the first one, and is the direct cause of the birth of the second final villain Ultron. And this artifact with incalculable terrifying power is now stored in the basement of this Hydra base. In fact, Baron Straker only guessed correctly, and it was correct to remove the word men in them. Because the only person coming for Loki's scepter is Chen Lu, who can predict the plot, the SHIELD soldiers led by Nick and the Avengers only want to get clues to the zombie virus. Therefore, according to Chen Lu's plan, Loki's scepter was put in his pocket. As for the toy-like zombie-controlled helmet, let's use it to give SHIELD Bureau a fun. Everyone stay on the ground. Hail Hydra! Baron Strack, who didn't know anything, raised his arms and shouted to boost his morale. At present, he can only do his best to defend this place. Hail Hydra! The dense forest area outside the Hydra base. The intensive rain of laser bullets continuously fired at SHIELD soldiers, and each shot was able to punch a large blood hole in the human body. It could be said that the wounds were touched, and the shot would kill, suppressing the lifting of SHIELD. Don't worry about it. In the absence of long-range bombing support, those solid bunkers unscrupulously ejected strong firepower, and ordinary soldiers had no way of using it. Maglev fighters flying high in the air are also uncomfortable. A large number of rocket pilots swarm in like locusts. The missiles used for aerial combat have little effect on these cheap soldiers, who are overwhelmed by quantity and quality. They are basically too entangled. Moving, one after another was shot down. Not to mention the heavy armored main battle tanks that control electromagnetic pulse robes. Once the large laser shells burst in the crowd, they will be wiped out and have no bones left. The ordinary ones. Anti-tank rockets are completely ineffective against these steel monsters equipped with reactive armor, and the situation is constantly developing in a one-sided direction. The weapon technology here far surpasses any Hydra base we have taken before. These weapons, we are almost at war with aliens. SHIELD, Signal Corps shouted loudly in the communication channel. He barely braved his head to observe the situation on the battlefield, but was immediately pressed back into the bunker by the firepower of the Hydra, almost losing his life. Besides, there should be 1,000 people. We are at a total disadvantage. Hydra's weapon technology is based on the original weapons of the alien army brought by Loki, and of course it will give people a feeling as strong as an alien. Although SHIELD has weapons made by alien technology as prototypes, they have not yet reached the stage of mass production, and from this point they are far behind their current opponents. Thor and the Hulk, two powerful superheroes, are trying their best to regain the disadvantages of SHIELD. Thor is using Thor's hammer to accumulate thunder and lightning to sweep the rocket soldiers in the sky. Hulk is rampaging on the battlefield to destroy those tricky bunkers and tanks. But after all, they are hard to beat the opponent with 4 hands. They can only gain a little bit of advantage for SHIELD, and cannot have a decisive turnaround effect on the frontal battlefield that lags behind the enemy in terms of quality and quantity. Captain America complained on the communication channel. Nick, we kicked the ant's nest. This is not a raid at all. Nick, guarding the aircraft carrier in the sky, also learned about the battlefield situation from remote monitoring. He did not know the existence of the Rocky Scepter and did not expect that the opponent's weapon technology had reached such a high level. I'm afraid only Tony's Iron Man Legion can be compared. The current Hydra hasn't decayed to the point where the movie, Avengers 2 Inches, is close to declining. This time everyone in SHIELD is really kicking the steel plate. Of course, Nick's personality will not wait to die. He ordered in the communication channel. Start Plan B. All SHIELD personnel cover the Avengers to enter the castle at all costs. Nick's intention is very obvious. Let the Avengers team break into the castle to get the zombie virus materials, and then let the SHIELD soldiers break and let the Avengers leave smoothly without worrying about the data being lost. In the event of destruction, the air carrier's carpet bombing capability was used to completely destroy the Hydra unit. Of course, this kind of action basically means giving up the lives of all SHIELD soldiers, and letting them hold the Hydra army in a situation of total disadvantage, and it is no different from sending them to death. A price must be paid in order to win. Nick has long realized this, and the soldiers who are destined to die are the same. This is what Captain America said at the beginning of the mobilization, a high price. The moment they heard the command from the communication channel, the SHIELD soldiers on the front line were naturally prepared to die. Inside the makeshift bunker, a soldier handed an envelope to Captain America. His eyes drifted for a while, but he didn't say much. The white envelope says neatly, "To my family, Leo Fitz." Several other soldiers came over one after another and took out the same envelope and handed it to Captain America. One of them looked firmly into his eyes and said, "Please complete the mission and go back alive, Captain." Quote. This kind of act of confessing the last words is by no means an exaggeration. At this moment, the SHIELD soldiers on the battlefield understand that only if they sacrifice their lives without fear of death can they have a chance to open a way for the Avengers. Even if they were lucky enough to survive the capture of Hydra, the air carrier would not consider their lives to continue bombing. This was something that was clear from the moment they joined SHIELD. Captain America pinched this heavy family letter, his lips moved a few times and he was speechless. He was prepared for heavy casualties, but he did not expect such a tragic result. More than 300 SHIELD soldiers present were annihilated, and only the Avengers were withdrawn under their cover. Is he really ready to accept such a plan? Is there really no other way? The captain looked at the extremely fierce battlefield ahead. Tony's power of thunder and lightning seemed to become weaker and weaker under the uncontrolled use. Although Hulk still gallops on the battlefield, there is no one to beat, but the advancing soldiers behind him still inevitably swept away by the enemy's powerful artillery fire. The gap between the combat effectiveness of one's own troops and the enemy is too great, and even if another alliance of Avengers is added, it may not be able to fill this vacancy. There is not much time left for them to make a choice, and the casualties continue to expand will only make Plan B impossible to implement. The remaining soldiers will only become a burden that needs the protection of superheroes. Yes, you only need to charge again. Suddenly a slightly unfamiliar voice was inserted into the communication channel, and most people woke up after half a second. This was the voice of Chen Lu, a new member of the Avengers. Chen, where are you now? Captain America quickly looked around, but couldn't find Chen Lu from the side of the battlefield, as if he hadn't participated in the war since the beginning. I will appear wherever you need me, give an order, Captain. Chen Lu certainly did not go as a deserter. If the SHIELD army cannot attack it, it would be difficult for him to get the Rocky Scepter alone, so he naturally wanted to help SHIELD. It was actually beyond Chen Lu's expectation that he would encounter such a stubborn resistance from Hydra, but with his strength, it was not irreversible. Spiritual Possession Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier, as a veteran killer who has performed countless infiltration, assassination, and overturning missions and has more than 70 years of experience, his most powerful place has never been in combat power, but the incomparable stealth skills. This is the ability to be close to instinct trained in the long assassin's career, and with the Winter Soldier, he has withstood countless trials of life and death. At this moment, all are in the hands of Chen Law firm. And Chen Lu's physical fitness is more than 10 times that of the Winter Soldier, as well as the use of dexterous metallization ability, all of which makes Chen Lu a stalker far above the Winter Soldier. Can pass through the enemy's blind spots at a faster speed, can climb higher cliffs, and can hide in narrower corners with the metallization ability. These abilities combined with the stealth skills of the Winter Soldier, there is one more human on the battlefield. The terrifying ghost captured. Chen Lu has actually been walking through the battlefield all the time, but no one can pay attention to his existence, or in other words, all enemies who see him have lost consciousness. Chen, unless there is a miracle, it is meaningless to let the soldiers rush up. Facing the powerful firepower of the enemy, Captain America deeply felt the difference in the strength of the two sides. At this time, even if there was another Hulk, it would be a drop in the bucket. And what miracle can Chen Lu create by himself? Chen Lu chuckled, and said arrogantly, "Captain, just do what I say, you will find that the so-called miracle is actually a very simple thing." Captain America is still skeptical, but he has always advocated the creed of trusting his partners. He finally chose to believe in this new Avenger. He commanded decisively in the communication channel. Team A started to move forward. Team C and D provide fire support for them. Team B, send your best gunners to kill the bunker at 2 o'clock. Boom. At the moment when Captain America uttered the word, bunker, was pointed to by the fort that was stuck in a key location suddenly exploded violently, and the whole bunker turned into a fiery red mushroom cloud. The machine gun, which had been pouring a lot of bullets, became dumb, allowing the soldiers of Team A to advance smoothly. Amidst the smoke from the explosion, a figure wearing a gray-black tactical stealth suit flashed by, but disappeared in the next second, as if that person had never existed. Chen, is that you? Even Captain America couldn't confirm that it was Chen Lu, and asked in surprise on the communication channel. In fact, Captain America more than once wanted Hulk to help clear the fortress accurately and clear the way for his own troops, but for the Hulk, who can only use brute force, Bruce Banner did his best to control the enemy and us. My own result. Boom. The explosion in the communicator and the explosion in reality came at the same time, and another bunker in a difficult location was blown into the sky. All this happened without warning and for unknown reasons. No one on the entire battlefield could see this clearly. Who did the good thing? Because the enemy who saw even the slightest clue had already been lying on the ground unconsciously. Who is doing the trick? After this happened twice, the Hydra soldiers who witnessed it all became panic. They could accept being crushed by Hulk or being smashed to death by Thor's lightning, because at least they could die. I understand that even if I find that the crisis comes, I can dodge a little bit, maybe I can survive. However, the two bunkers that exploded in front of them were completely blown up into the sky as if they were self-destructed. This kind of unknown fear like encountering a spiritual event made their nerves tense. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.